English podcast. Listen, learn, and speak English daily.
Imagine standing in front of a heavy glass office door. You're holding a lukewarm coffee, your badge is clipped to your lanyard, and you're just about to pull the handle.
Right, the classic terrifying first day.
Exactly. And the thing is, you know exactly how to do your job. I mean, you have a master's degree, you've been a financial analyst or, a software engineer for a decade.
You're completely competent.
Completely. But the moment your hand touches that cold metal handle, this terrifying realization just washes over you. You have absolutely no idea how to say hello to the person sitting at the reception desk on the other side.
Yeah, it's a very localized, highly specific form of paralysis.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, because your professional competency is entirely intact, right? Mm-hmm. But the communicative vehicle to actually express it simply isn't there yet.
And that is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. Today's mission is to unpack this fascinating instructional guide.
It really is a goldmine.
It is. It's a lesson plan specifically designed for English learners who are navigating one of the most stressful professional experiences imaginable, which is stepping into a new English-speaking workplace for the very first time.
And, what we have here isn't just a basic list of vocabulary words.
No, not at all.
It's essentially a behavioral and linguistic autopsy of corporate culture. It's a comprehensive breakdown of workplace integration.
Yeah, it isolates the essential terminology, the mandatory conversational scripts, the actual physical mechanics of pronunciation, and those invisible cultural tripwires that govern these spaces.
Which are everywhere, by the way.
Oh, absolutely everywhere. And I want to say right up front to you listening at home, even if you are a native English speaker, even if you've worked in corporate America or London or Sydney your entire life, looking at this guide is like viewing your daily work life through an X-ray machine.
It really strips it down to the studs.
It does. It exposes the hidden social mechanics, the required politeness, and the massive psychological hurdles of stepping into a new environment.
Right, because we take all of that for granted.
Exactly. We're going to decode exactly how professional relationships are built, literally from minute one. So let's just get right into the psychological landscape of day one.
Let's do it.
So the source material kicks off by addressing the user directly. And it acknowledges that starting a new job is, quote, exciting and a little nervous at the same time.
Which I gotta say, from a cognitive psychology standpoint, is a profound understatement.
Just a bit of an understatement, yeah.
Right, because we are talking about a massive concurrent cognitive overload.
Because you have a dual burden here. First, you have the standard baseline anxiety of just learning a new job.
Where is the printer?
Right. Where's the printer? How does the expense reporting software work? What are the unwritten rules about using the microwave in the break room?
The really important stuff.
Yeah. But layered on top of all of that, you are carrying the immense cognitive load of processing a completely new language environment.
If we look at this through the lens of cognitive bandwidth, the human brain has a finite amount of working memory.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, when you're a native speaker starting a new job, your language processing is fully automated. It just happens in the background.
You don't even think about it.
Exactly. Leaving all of your active cognitive resources completely free to focus on learning the new job duties. In psychology, we call that the extraneous load.
Okay, I follow.
But for an English learner, the language itself demands active, conscious processing.
It's front and center.
Right. Every single interaction requires them to mentally translate the input, formulate a response, check the grammar in their head, translate it back to English, and then articulate it.
Man, it's like trying to run a high-end video game on a computer that's simultaneously downloading a massive operating system update.
That is a perfect analogy. Everything lags.
Everything lags. And the source material seems to intuitively understand this lag because it immediately equips the learner with very basic, highly repetitive phrases.
Things like, hello, nice to meet you.
Or, today is my first day here. Or simply, my name is Alex.
Right. They are providing cognitive offloading tools.
And when I first read that section, I honestly thought, well, obviously, that's just basic English 101. Why are we dedicating precious page space to, hello, my name is?
It feels a bit elementary at first glance.
It does. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized these aren't just language tools. They are psychological anchors.
How do you mean?
Well, when I was younger, I used to play in local chess tournaments.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, just for fun. But when you first start learning chess, the sheer number of possible opening moves on the board is paralyzing.
I can imagine.
You look at the 64 squares, and your brain just freezes.
Yeah.
So what do? You memorize the opening sequence.
Better learn the patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You learn the Queen's Gambit or the Roy Lopez. You don't even have to think about the first 5 or 6 moves. You just execute them blindly.
And that takes the pressure off.
Right. Because you have that pre-rehearsed script, the panic of the ticking clock just fades. You buy yourself time to settle into the reality of the board.
That is a brilliant framework for this. But actually, let's push that chess analogy even further.
Yeah, let's do it.
What happens in a chess game if you don't know the opening moves?
You spend 10 minutes agonizing over the first pawn push.
Right. The clock runs down, you start sweating, your opponent senses your lack of preparation.
Oh yeah, they smell blood in the water.
Exactly. And the same applies to social interaction, especially in a corporate environment. The culture demands a highly specific rhythm.
A rhythm, I like that.
When you walk up to a new colleague, there is a fraction of a second, a literal beat, where a greeting is culturally expected.
And if you miss that beat, the awkwardness is just physically painful.
It really is. If you have to formulate that greeting from scratch, searching your mental dictionary for the culturally appropriate level of formality, conjugating the verb.
Checking the pronunciation of a word like colleague in your head.
Yes. You miss the beat. The interaction derails before it even begins.
So having it automated is survival.
Completely. If you have, hello, nice to meet you. Today's my first day here. Fully automated, stored in your procedural memory rather than your declarative memory, you master that rhythm.
You hit the beat perfectly.
You do. It signals competence. It shows you understand the social contract, even if your functional vocabulary beyond that point is entirely elementary.
But let me push back on that just a little bit. Is it really just about buying time and settling your own nerves?
What else do you think it is?
Because when I think about corporate introductions, there is a real power dynamic at play. When you flawlessly execute those opening moves, aren't you also implicitly proving that you belong there?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like saying, hey, I know the secret handshake. It lowers the stakes of the interaction right off the bat because the other person instantly relaxes and categorizes you as safe and professional.
It establishes a baseline of professional legitimacy. It lowers the internal cortisol spike for the speaker, sure, but it also manages the expectations of the listener.
Right, it's a two-way street.
You are signaling cooperative intent. You are showing that you are willing to play the game by the established rules.
Okay, so you execute the opening moves.
Yeah.
You've introduced yourself. The cortisol is dropping.
You've survived minute 1.
Barely. But to survive the rest of the day, you really need to understand the pieces on the board. And that brings us to the foundational vocabulary.
The structural nodes of the workplace.
Right. The source text outlines exactly 8 critical workplace terms that a beginner needs to know.
8 words to map the entire corporate ecosystem. It's quite a bold distillation of a very complex environment.
It is, and I want to list them because I actually have a bone to pick with this text.
Okay, let's hear them.
The words are manager, team, office, colleague, orientation, responsibilities, schedule, and department.
Okay.
Now, when I first read that list, I immediately thought, wait, just 8 words. I don't buy that for a second.
Why not?
Because if I am dropped into a new job, I need to know where the bathroom is. I need the word for payroll so I can, actually get paid.
Fair points.
I need the word for IT because my laptop is locked out. If I can't figure out those operational things, I am not surviving the week, let alone the month. How can this text claim these 8 words are enough?
Your reaction is completely logical, but it confuses operational vocabulary with structural vocabulary.
Okay, what's the difference?
What this text is doing is providing the foundational scaffolding. Think of it this way. Payroll and IT and bathroom, those are the furniture inside the house.
Right, you need them to be comfortable.
You definitely need them to live there. But these 8 words, manager, team, department, schedule, these are the load-bearing walls.
I see.
They answer the 3 most essential existential questions for any newcomer in any social hierarchy. Who am I dealing with? Where am I located in the system? And what am I supposed to be doing?
Okay, the load-bearing walls. I like that distinction. So walk me through the who portion of that scaffolding.
Look at how the text defines the who. We have manager, team, and colleague. That is your immediate vertical and horizontal social hierarchy.
The people above you and beside you.
Exactly. A manager, according to the text's very specific definition, is the person who supervises employees and makes important decisions.
Notice the precision there. It doesn't just say the boss.
No, it specifically highlights decision-making authority. Then you have the team, defined as a group of people working together, and the colleague, simply a person you work with.
It sets up really clear boundaries.
It does. You know who evaluates you, who you are required to collaborate with to achieve a goal, and who's simply sharing the physical or virtual space with you.
Right, the person you just nod at in the hallway versus the person whose code you actually have to review.
Exactly.
And then the where is covered by office and department. The office is the physical geography, but the department is the functional geography.
Yes, the text defines department as a section of a company that focuses on specific work.
So you are locating yourself in physical space and in purpose.
Precisely.
Huh.
And finally, you have the what? Orientation, responsibilities, and schedule.
Orientation being the initiation process.
Right. Responsibilities are the tasks or duties you must do, and the schedule is the plan for the day or week.
I want to pause on schedule for a second here.
Okay, sure.
Because earlier we talked about the audience for this guide. These learners are coming from all over the world.
Right.
When the text simply defines schedule as a plan for the day or week, it feels like it's totally glossing over a massive cultural concept.
It really is.
I was reading a piece of sociological research a while back about monochronic versus polychronic time. Have you come across that?
Yes, Edward T. Hall's work on cultural time orientations. This is a critical point to bring up.
Right. So in Western English-speaking corporate cultures, the US, the UK, Canada, we operate on monochronic time.
Time is linear.
Yes, time is a tangible commodity. It can be spent, saved, wasted, or invested. A schedule is a rigid, almost sacred grid.
It dictates everything.
But many learners coming from Latin America or parts of the Middle East and Africa, they come from polychronic cultures where time is fluid.
It's much more contextual.
Exactly. Relationships and conversations take precedence over arbitrary deadlines. If a meeting is scheduled for 10:00 a.m. in a polychronic culture, 10:30 is perfectly acceptable if you were, say, finishing a really valuable conversation with a colleague in the hallway.
The cognitive dissonance for a learner transitioning between those systems is staggering.
It has to be.
For a polychronic learner, the word schedule translated directly into their native language, it might just mean a rough guideline of intentions.
A suggestion.
Right. But in the English-speaking workplace, schedule means a rigid commodification of your existence.
Wow.
If you are 5 minutes late, you are perceived as disrespectful or disorganized. By isolating schedule as one of the 8 foundational pillars, the instructional guide is implicitly teaching Western corporate temporal values.
It's saying, in this culture, time rules everything.
Exactly. It's not just a vocabulary word, it's a behavioral expectation.
That is fascinating. The word isn't just a noun, it's a cultural mandate. And I guess the same goes for responsibilities. Well, the text defines it as the tasks or duties you must do at work. And gives the example. My responsibilities include answering emails.
Right.
It completely demystifies the corporate speak, but it also locks you into a specific contractual mindset. You are defined by your output.
Precisely. So, to answer your earlier pushback about why only 8 words.
Yeah. My furniture analogy.
Right. If you have these structural nodes, if you know who judges your output, which is the manager, what your output is supposed to be, the responsibilities, and the rigid time frame in which it must be delivered, the schedule.
You have the survival matrix.
You do. You can use that matrix to figure out where IT is or how to set up payroll. The structure allows you to acquire the operational details safely.
Okay, you can see the point. You win. The 8 words are the skeleton.
Thank you.
But, a skeleton doesn't do much until you put muscle on it and make it actually move. Which brings us to the case study in the text. The guide provides a highly structured 3-part scenario featuring a new employee named Alex, an HR representative named Emma, and a team manager named Mark.
It is an absolute masterclass in simulating the ideal, frictionless onboarding experience.
It really is. Let's break down the dialogue because the text pulls out very specific grammatical structures for the learner to memorize.
Yes, it highlights key phrases.
It kicks off with interaction 1, the reception. Alex walks into the building, approaches Emma, and before he can even stumble through his memorized introduction, Emma says, "Good morning, you must be the new employee."
Right.
Now, the guide explicitly highlights this phrase. It says, "you must be," is often used when someone expects to meet a new person.
This is a brilliant inclusion because it dives right into the pragmatics of epistemic modality.
Okay, stop right there. Time out. What on earth is epistemic modality? You can't just drop a term like that without breaking it down for me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's break it down. In linguistics, modal verbs, words like can, could, should, must, they express necessity or possibility.
Okay.
Now, deontic modality is about obligation. For example, you must wear a tie to work. That's a rule.
Got it. You must do this.
Right. But epistemic modality is about deduction and probability based on evidence.
Oh, interesting.
When Emma says, you must be the new employee, she isn't commanding him to be the employee. She is looking at the evidence.
A new face, looking slightly lost, arriving at 9 a.m. on a Monday.
Exactly. And she is deducing with near certainty his identity.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. So why is it so crucial to teach a beginner that specific deductive phrase? Why not just teach them the simpler question like, are you the new employee?
Because are you is a pure question that requires the learner to actively supply information to justify their presence.
It puts them on the spot.
It puts the burden of proof entirely on the newcomer. But you must be is a rhetorical embrace. It signals anticipation, preparation, and expectation.
Yes. It creates an immediate psychological safe harbor.
Exactly.
Imagine walking into a massive glass building, your heart is pounding, and having to justify your existence. Hi, I'm Alex. I was hired last week by a guy named Steve. Do you know who I am?
It's terrifying.
It is. But when Emma says, you must be the new employee, she's effectively saying, we know you're coming. We are prepared for you. You belong in this space.
It instantly removes the defensive posture.
And knowing that phrase passively means the learner knows they're welcome even before they speak a single word.
And then we move to what happens right after the introduction. Emma asks, how are you feeling on your first day?
I call this interaction 2, the vulnerability check. And this part actually blew my mind a little bit.
Why is that?
Well, Alex replies, a little nervous, but very excited. And Emma responds, that's completely normal. Starting a new job is always exciting.
It's a very revealing piece of dialogue regarding contemporary corporate culture.
Extremely revealing. Because think about old school, traditional corporate environments, say Wall Street in the 1980s, or a highly rigid old money law firm.
Right.
In those environments, admitting nervousness was an absolute liability. It was seen as weakness.
You never show fear.
Exactly. The expectation was that you walked in, shook hands firmly, and projected unwavering, bulletproof confidence, even if you were completely terrified inside. But this modern ESL text intentionally scripts an admission of vulnerability.
It reflects a massive shift in modern HR practices towards emotional intelligence and psychological safety.
It's so different now.
Validating employee feelings, acknowledging the innate stress of transitions, and normalizing anxiety are now considered absolute best practices for onboarding.
Which is great.
By explicitly teaching the learner how to express this complex, dual emotion, nervous but excited, the curriculum is giving them linguistic permission to just be human.
It's teaching emotional intelligence as vocabulary.
It really is.
And nervous but excited is such a highly strategic diplomatic phrase. It's honest about the anxiety, which builds trust through vulnerability, but it pivots immediately to enthusiasm.
Which reassures the employer that you are motivated.
Right. It's the perfect corporate answer. And from there, Emma hands Alex off to Mark, the manager, for Interaction 3, the guided tour.
The physical orientation?
Right. Mark introduces himself and says, let me show you around the office.
The guide specifically highlights show you around for comprehension, defining it as someone will guide you through a place.
I love this phrase, but I want to look at it as a metaphor.
Okay, let's explore that.
On a literal level, yes, Mark is going to point out the break room, show Alex where the copy paper is kept, and point out the restrooms.
Basic.
But on a deeper sociological level, a manager saying, let me show you around, is an initiation rite. It's the ultimate gesture of leadership, taking a newcomer under their wing. The manager is actively, physically taking responsibility for integrating the new hire into the social hierarchy of the space.
They are conferring status on the newcomer just by walking next to them.
Exactly.
If we connect this back to the structural scaffolding we discussed earlier, the manager is acting as the bridge between the unknown and the known.
That's a great way to put it.
And by practicing this specific interaction, the learner knows exactly what script to expect. They won't be caught off guard when someone offers to walk them around. They know the culturally appropriate response is, as Alex says in the text, that would be great.
I see the immense value in that, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go ahead.
Look at this entire interaction. Emma magically knows exactly who Alex is the second he walks in.
True.
Alex admits nerves, and Emma warmly validates him. Mark, the manager, is perfectly on time, warmly greets him, and personally offers a tour.
It is incredibly sanitized.
It's the absolute flawless, ideal path. Real life is almost never this clean.
It's usually quite chaotic.
Exactly. What happens when the receptionist is on a stressful phone call and just points to a chair? What happens when the manager is running 20 minutes late and nobody knows where Alex is supposed to sit?
Those are very real scenarios.
How does practicing this perfectly clean, utopian scenario help a learner when the reality of day one is usually messy and awkward?
That is a very valid critique of instructional design. However, from a pedagogical standpoint, providing the ideal path is absolutely necessary to establish a baseline of expectations.
A baseline.
You cannot navigate a deviation if you don't know what the standard operating procedure is actually supposed to look like.
So you have to know the rules before you can survive them breaking around you.
Precisely. If you know that the ideal socially expected script involves a greeting, an introduction, and a tour, you are much better equipped to prompt those actions if they don't happen naturally.
Ah, I see.
For instance, if the manager finally shows up late and stressed and completely forgets to offer a tour, the learner, knowing the ideal script, might confidently ask, "Could someone show me around the office later?"
That makes total sense.
The idealized script provides the blueprint for self-advocacy. If they didn't know a tour was standard practice, they might just sit at an empty desk all day, completely paralyzed by the ambiguity.
Okay, you've convinced me again. The script gives them the agency to ask for what they need.
It empowers them.
So having the perfect script in your head is only half the battle. The other half, and arguably the much harder half, is the actual physical mechanics of delivering those words out loud without stumbling.
The execution phase.
Right. And the source material dives deep into what I want to call the physics of fluency.
This is where we move from the cognitive and pragmatic realms into the purely physiological realm.
It addresses specific pronunciation tips and common beginner mistakes. And it starts by dismantling a massive misconception: speed.
Ah, yes.
The speed fallacy. The speed fallacy. The text explicitly warns, quote, "Don't worry about speaking fast. Clear speech is more important than speed."
It's a crucial warning.
Now, I feel like this is a universal truth of learning almost any new skill. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Exactly.
But why is it that language learners universally equate rapid machine gun speech with fluency?
Because of the acoustic illusion created by native speakers.
An acoustic illusion.
Yes. When a learner listens to a native speaker, the speech sounds incredibly rapid to their untrained ear. It flows in one continuous, unbroken stream.
Right. It just sounds like one giant word.
So the beginner assumes that to sound native, they must replicate that sheer velocity. But what they don't realize is that native speakers aren't actually just talking fast. They are utilizing highly complex phonetic systems that allow words to blend naturally.
You mentioned some terms earlier when we were prepping for this. Assimilation, elision, connected speech.
Right.
I tried to wrap my head around them. Is assimilation like when Americans say wanna instead of want to?
That is a perfect example. Assimilation is when a sound changes to become more like a neighboring sound, simply making it physically easier to say quickly. Want to becomes wanna.
It's just laziness, basically.
Well, efficiency. Or think about the word handbag. Native speakers rarely pronounce the hard D.
Wait, really? Handbag. Handbag. Oh, well, I do say handbag.
Exactly. It assimilates into an M sound because your lips are naturally preparing for the B in bag. It sounds like handbag.
That's wild.
And then elision is the complete dropping of a sound, like saying camera instead of camera. These phonetic shortcuts are what create that smooth, rapid flow.
So when a beginner tries to just talk fast without understanding those underlying physical shortcuts, all that elision and assimilation, what actually happens?
They end up trying to articulate every single consonant and vowel perfectly, but at double speed.
Oh, man.
It requires immense muscular effort in the jaw and tongue. The result is a rushed, garbled, chaotic output that is entirely incomprehensible to the native listener.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
They are breaking the phonotactic rules of the language by brute force.
It's like trying to play a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo at double speed before you've even learned how to hold the pick. You're just frantically mashing the strings and creating noise.
That's exactly what it is.
And ironically, trying to speak quickly actually projects the exact opposite of confidence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It projects panic. It signals to the listener that you are incredibly uncomfortable taking up space in the conversation, and you are rushing to get your turnover with as quickly as humanly possible.
Whereas deliberate, measured speech, even if it's quite slow, projects authority.
It shows you are in control.
It tells the listener, I am taking the time to articulate my thoughts clearly, and I expect you to afford me the time to do so. The source text is literally trying to give the learner permission to claim their time and space in the room.
Which is a powerful, powerful psychological shift.
Speaking of things that trip beginners up, the text moves right into the translation trap.
Oh, this is a big one.
It points out the danger of translating directly from a native language, noting that this creates unnatural English.
This is arguably one of the hardest cognitive habits to break.
Why is it so hard?
When we learn a language as adults, our brain's default setting is to act as a one-to-one dictionary.
Right.
We conceptualize a thought in our native language, we mentally translate the individual words into English, and then we string them together using the grammatical syntax of our mother tongue.
Right. And I was thinking about how to visualize this, and it reminds me of trying to use the wrong currency in a vending machine.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Let's say you're visiting London and you're thirsty. So you go to a vending machine. You reach into your pocket and you pull out a perfectly good, shiny American quarter. And you try to put it in the slot.
It won't work.
Right. Now, the quarter has inherent value. It's real money. The machine is fully functional. But the machine is calibrated for a completely different shape, a different weight, a different mechanical system entirely.
It's expecting a pound coin.
Exactly. It's just going to spit the quarter right back out at you. Direct translation feels like that. The individual English words might be technically correct, but if you assemble them using the currency of your native language's grammar and idioms, the English-speaking listener, the vending machine, won't be able to process the meaning.
It just bounces off.
It does.
That is an excellent analogy, but let's actually take it a step further. What happens if you get frustrated and keep trying to forcefully jam that American quarter into the British machine?
You break the slot.
Exactly. You don't just lose your money, you break the mechanism.
Oh, I see.
In a corporate setting, if you continually use direct translations that sound unnatural or inadvertently rude because the syntax is completely wrong, you aren't just failing to communicate a single idea.
You're damaging the relationship.
You are slowly breaking the social relationship. The listener becomes fatigued trying to decode your meaning every single time you speak.
So to avoid breaking the machine, you have to use the local currency.
Yes. You have to adopt what the text calls common English phrases as complete, indivisible units of meaning, rather than assembling them from scratch like Lego bricks every single time.
Use the phrases as complete units. I love that. And that ties perfectly into the next concept the text explores, which is sentence rhythm.
Ah, the prosody.
The guide advises learners to listen to natural conversations to catch this rhythm. Now, when I read sentence rhythm, I initially assumed it meant speaking like a metronome, keeping a perfectly steady beat. But is it actually more about which words we choose to emphasize to show intent?
It's really a combination of both, actually. Every language has its own unique prosody, its own music and timing.
Okay.
Languages are generally divided into two categories: syllable-timed and stress-timed.
What's the difference?
Spanish or French, for example, are syllable-timed. Each syllable takes up roughly the exact same amount of time, giving it a very steady, machine gun-like rhythm. Da-da-da-da-da.
Yes, sir. Very even.
English, however, is a stress-timed language. The rhythm is determined by the stressed syllables occurring at roughly equal intervals, while the unstressed syllables in between them get compressed, rushed, or reduced to a very short sound.
Okay, give me an example of that in action so I can hear it.
Think of the phrase, "I'm looking forward to learning from everyone."
Okay.
The beat, the stress, lands on the key content words: looking, forward, learning, EV, everyone. Tap, 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 tap.
Right, I hear that.
The words I'm, to, and from are just grammatical glue. They get compressed.
Except learning from everyone.
Exactly. If a learner from a syllable-timed language tries to speak English, they will naturally stress every word equally. I am looking forward to learning.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it sounds completely different.
It sounds robotic, exhausting, and completely unnatural, even if the pronunciation of every single vowel and consonant is utterly flawless.
So it's not just about hitting the right notes. It's about hitting them on the right beat and compressing the notes that don't matter as much.
Exactly. And the text rightly notes that passive listening, like listening to podcasts or watching movies, tunes the brain to this specific musicality.
It's learning by osmosis.
By constantly bathing in natural speech, the brain absorbs that rhythmic pattern subconsciously. It improves comprehension because you start to naturally anticipate exactly where the stress patterns will land. And it improves speaking because your brain inherently wants to mimic that music when you produce the language.
You just soak in the beat until it feels natural.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the trickiest part of this whole deep dive, I think. Communication, as we all know from painful personal experience, isn't just about the words you say.
Unfortunately not.
It's not just about how fast you say them or even the beautiful prosodic rhythm you use. It is heavily, heavily reliant on the unspoken physical cues that accompany those words.
Body language.
And this instructional text does not shy away from that reality. It dives right into the unspoken language of cultural expectations.
This section on cultural tips for the workplace is, from an anthropological perspective, perhaps the most critical part of the entire guide.
Really? The most critical?
I believe so. It moves completely beyond linguistics and into sociology. It highlights 3 specific behavioral mandates for the learner. Be polite, make eye contact, and be friendly.
Let's start with make eye contact, because this one feels like a complete cultural minefield.
Oh, it absolutely is.
The source explicitly states, in many cultures, eye contact shows confidence and respect. When I read that, I immediately thought, wow, that is highly, highly localized.
It is entirely localized to Western and particularly Anglo-American corporate culture. The fact that the guide needs to state this so explicitly highlights a massive global divergence in nonverbal communication.
Let's talk about that divergence, because for a massive portion of the global population, maintaining direct, sustained eye contact with a manager or a superior is not a sign of respect at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
If you look at Geert Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory, specifically the power distance index.
Okay, what is the power distance index?
It measures how a culture views hierarchy and authority. Cultures with high power distance, which includes many Asian, African, and Latin American cultures, value strict hierarchical boundaries.
Okay.
In those cultures, lowering your gaze when speaking to authority is a necessary demonstration of deference, humility, and respect.
You are honoring their status.
Exactly. Direct eye contact is interpreted as a challenge, an act of insubordination, or outright aggression.
So imagine this scenario. You have a brilliant new employee from a high power distance culture. They have memorized the English vocabulary perfectly.
You've got the rhythm down.
Right. They walk into the manager's office in Chicago or London. They want to show the utmost respect to their new boss, so they lower their eyes and look at the desk while delivering their flawless English introduction. They are completely misread.
It's a catastrophic cultural mismatch.
Catastrophic.
But the English-speaking manager, operating in a lower power distance culture where egalitarianism is simulated through eye contact, thinks, this person lacks confidence.
Or worse, this person is avoiding my gaze. They are hiding something. They are untrustworthy.
Exactly. The learner's attempt at profound respect is decoded as incompetence or deceit.
That is heartbreaking,
Yeah.
honestly. So by explicitly teaching eye contact as a required physical behavior, the guide is providing a crucial cultural translation, not just a linguistic one.
Yes.
It's explicitly telling the learner, I know what this means where you are from, but in this specific ecosystem, this physical action equals confidence. You have to perform it.
It forces us to ask a difficult question about the nature of language learning. How much of speaking English in a corporate setting is actually just performing these expected physical behaviors?
Think about it. If you memorize the script perfectly, hello, my name is Alex, today's my first day, and you get the rhythm and the pronunciation absolutely right, but you stare at the floor the entire time, have you successfully communicated?
Pragmatically speaking, you have not. Communication is the successful transfer of intent.
And your intent in land.
Right. Your intent was to say, I am a competent, respectful, new professional ready to join the team. The words carried that message, but your body language actively destroyed it before it reached the listener.
Wow.
In a high-context professional environment, the physical performance frequently outweighs the verbal content. The guide implicitly recognizes this reality by placing eye contact and smiling right alongside vocabulary lists and grammar rules.
It's linguistic theater. You have to hit your marks on stage, deliver your lines with the right rhythm, and make sure your facial expressions match the genre of the play.
That's a great way to think about it.
If you're acting in a comedy but crying, the audience is confused.
Yeah.
And part of that play, part of that performance involves what I'm calling the Trinity of politeness.
Ah, yes.
The text highlights the use of please, thank you, and excuse me.
the essential social lubricants of the English language.
Right. And again, my initial reaction was, these are so basic. We teach these to 2-year-olds. What's the magic word, Timmy, please?
Right, it feels obvious.
Why dedicate valuable space to them in a corporate survival guide for highly educated adults?
Because we have to understand the sociolinguistic mechanics of what those words actually do in a high-stress environment.
Okay, explain the mechanics.
In pragmatics, there's a concept called politeness theory, developed by Brown and Levinson. It revolves around the idea of face.
Like saving face.
Similar, yes. Every person has a positive face, which is the desire to be liked and approved of, and a negative face, which is the desire for autonomy and freedom from imposition.
Okay, positive face is wanting to be liked. Negative face is wanting to be left alone. I'm following.
Exactly. So when you ask someone to do something in an office, you are committing a face-threatening act.
A face-threatening act. I love how dramatic linguistics can be.
It is dramatic. You are imposing on their negative face their autonomy. In a cross-cultural environment where language barriers exist, misunderstandings are mathematically guaranteed to happen.
It's inevitable.
A sentence from a learner might come out sounding incredibly demanding because they simply lack the nuanced, advanced vocabulary to soften it.
Right.
For example, instead of saying, "Would you mind possibly passing me that quarterly report when you have a second?" they might just say, "Give me the report."
Which, to a native speaker's ear, sounds incredibly aggressive and rude. It's a direct attack on their autonomy.
Exactly. It's a massive face-threatening act. But if that clunky, highly direct sentence is wrapped in the trinity of politeness, "Please give me the report, thank you," the friction is instantly mitigated.
It softens the blow.
Please and thank you act as linguistic tokens. They are mitigating devices that restore the listener's autonomy. The native speaker recognizes the effort at politeness, accepts the token, and forgives the grammatical bluntness.
A grammatical mistake, or an overly blunt syntax, is easily forgiven if it's sandwiched between a please and a thank you.
They do the heavy lifting.
Those words signal cooperative intent, which is ultimately the most important message in any team environment. They are the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free cards for language learners.
That is exactly their function. They absorb the shock of cultural and linguistic friction.
Okay, so let's take stock here. We've covered the structural vocabulary, the required scripts, the physical physics of pronunciation, the rhythmic music of the language, the culturally loaded eye contact, and the sociolinguistic mechanics of politeness.
It's a lot.
Mastering all of this simultaneously while trying to figure out how to actually do a new job is frankly overwhelming. It's a monumental cognitive task.
It requires immense resilience.
Which is why the final major section of the source material completely shifts gears. It moves away from what to learn and focuses entirely on the psychological mindset required for the journey.
Yes.
It's about overcoming fear and establishing a daily practice regimen.
This section addresses what is arguably the single most significant barrier to adult language acquisition, the paralyzing psychological fear of making mistakes. The text states very simply, mistakes are part of learning.
It's such a simple cliché sentence, but in this context, it carries immense weight.
It really does.
The fear of making a mistake, the fear of looking foolish in front of new colleagues, it completely halts the learning process. If you are terrified of mispronouncing a word or using the wrong tense, you just won't speak.
You shut down.
You'll stay silent in meetings. And if you don't speak, you don't practice.
Right.
And if you don't practice, you never improve. It's a vicious, self-fulfilling cycle of silence.
To explain exactly why this happens, we have to look at Stephen Krashen's theory of the affective filter in second language acquisition.
The affective filter.
The affective filter is an invisible psychological barrier. When a learner is anxious, highly self-conscious, or afraid of ridicule, this filter goes up. And it doesn't just make them quiet, it literally blocks the brain from processing and acquiring new language input.
Wait, it physically blocks learning? How does that actually work?
It's rooted in neuroscience. When you are afraid of making a mistake, your amygdala triggers a stress response, releasing cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Right. High levels of cortisol actively inhibit the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain responsible for encoding new memories.
Oh, wow.
So a terrified learner might hear the English words, they might even understand them in the moment, but the brain is too busy managing the physiological anxiety to store that linguistic data in long-term memory.
The input bounces off the affective filter.
Yes. Lowering that filter by normalizing mistakes, by truly believing that mistakes are part of learning is scientifically necessary for memory encoding to occur.
So you have to fail to remember.
You have to be willing to sound foolish in the short term to allow your brain to build the fluency for the long term.
You have to embrace the messy middle. The anxiety literally deletes the vocabulary before it can be saved. That is wild to me.
It's a biological reality.
And to help lower that filter and build confidence, the guide prescribes a very specific 4-step daily practice tip. It says, listen to podcasts daily, repeat phrases aloud, practice with friends, and learn new vocabulary every day.
It's a beautifully comprehensive regimen. It covers passive input through podcasts, active physiological output by repeating aloud, social application with friends, and continuous cognitive expansion with new vocabulary.
It reminds me so much of training a muscle. I used to be really into weightlifting, and you learn very quickly that you don't get stronger by sitting on the couch and reading a book about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That would be nice, but no.
You can memorize all the anatomy, you can understand the physics of a bicep curl perfectly, but until you pick up the heavy iron and subject your muscle fibers to physical resistance, absolutely nothing changes.
That is a very biologically accurate analogy. Reading the grammar rules silently is the equivalent of reading the weightlifting book. It provides declarative knowledge, but no procedural skill.
Exactly. And repeating phrases aloud is the mental equivalent of lifting the weights. You have to physically train the muscles of your jaw, your lips, your tongue, and your vocal cords to produce these entirely new sounds.
It's a physical workout.
You're literally building neurological pathways, thickening the myelin sheaths around the neurons through sheer physical repetition. But I want to push back on one of their tips here. Practice with friends.
What's the issue with that?
Is that actually good advice? Because if my friends are also English learners, are we just going to reinforce each other's mistakes?
That is a very common concern, but it misses the primary function of practicing with friends.
Which is what?
The goal of practicing with peers isn't necessarily perfect grammatical correction. The goal is lowering the affective filter. A friend provides a low-stakes, safe environment to test your strength.
Oh.
It's like going to the gym with a spotter. You are much more willing to attempt a heavier weight or a more complex sentence structure if you know someone is there to catch the bar if you fail without jugging you.
And that makes total sense.
Once the confidence is built in that safe environment, the learner can carry that confidence into the high-stakes corporate arena.
Okay, I love that. The friend is the spotter. And the final tip, learning new vocabulary every day, is basically the concept of progressive overload. You just add a little more weight to the bar each time so the muscle keeps growing.
And if we connect this all to the bigger picture of adult learning, it underscores a fundamental truth. Language is not merely a body of knowledge to be passively acquired. It is a physical and social skill to be actively performed.
Like playing an instrument.
Exactly. And like any performance-based skill, consistency beats intensity every single time. Listening daily, even for just 10 minutes on a commute, keeps the brain tuned to the frequency of the language.
You know, this entire discussion actually makes me want to pause and ask you, the listener, to reflect on your own learning processes for a moment.
It's a good moment for that.
Whether you are currently trying to learn a new language for travel, or you're figuring out a complex new software program at work, or even just picking up a new hobby like painting or playing tennis, how often does the fear of looking like a beginner stop you dead in your tracks?
Probably more often than we'd like to admit.
Right. How often do you avoid the necessary, awkward, repetitive practice because you hate the feeling of not being instantly competent at something?
It's a very uncomfortable feeling.
This ESL guide, designed for people facing immense corporate pressure, is a stark reminder that the awkwardness isn't a sign of failure. It is the required entry fee for mastery. The cortisol spike, the fumbling for words, the missed beats, that is what the process of growth actually looks like.
It's an incredibly important reminder for all of us. The beginner's mindset requires a profound amount of humility, but it's the only direction that actually leads forward.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and pull all of this together. We've gone on quite a profound journey today, dissecting what initially looks like a very simple, rudimentary beginner's English guide.
It's been fascinating. We started by examining the immense psychological pressure and cognitive load of day one, and how basic introductory phrases serve as vital emotional anchors and survival mechanisms to manage the ticking clock of social interaction.
We mapped out the structural vocabulary of the office, those essential 8 load-bearing words that answer who, what, and where, and debated how concepts like schedule secretly encode Western monochronic time values.
We dissected the perfect, idealized HR greeting script and realized how phrases like "you must be" utilize epistemic modality to create immediate psychological safety.
We explored the physiological physics of fluency, debunking the speed fallacy, explaining the mechanics of assimilation and elision, recognizing the danger of the direct translation trap, and highlighting the critical importance of stress-time sentence rhythm.
And we dug deep into the unspoken, performative language of cultural expectations, why eye contact is culturally loaded and tied to power dynamics, and how the trinity of politeness acts as a crucial sociolinguistic shock absorber to protect negative face.
Finally, we tackle the neuroscience of fear, the affective filter, and the physical reality of building a language muscle through daily progressive practice.
It truly is a comprehensive roadmap for navigating not just a new lexicon, but an entirely new social and corporate ecosystem.
And that's what I want to leave our listeners with today. The principles we extracted from this guide, the necessity of clear communication over rapid-fire speed, the quiet strategic power of admitting vulnerability with a phrase like, "I'm nervous but excited," the importance of active listening to catch the rhythm of a room, and the acute awareness of our physical presence and eye contact, these are universally applicable.
They absolutely are.
Whether you are stepping into a foreign country, or you're a native English speaker stepping into a new corporate boardroom, or even just joining a new community organization in your hometown, the underlying mechanics of human connection remain exactly the same.
The foundational rules of establishing trust, mitigating friction, and demonstrating cooperative competence don't change, regardless of what your native tongue happens to be.
Exactly. Which leads me to a final thought experiment for everyone listening.
Oh, I like these.
At the very end of this source material, there's a final practice challenge. The guide asks these brave learners to practice introducing themselves aloud. It gives them a fill-in-the-blank script. "Hello, my name is blank. Today's my first day. I'm excited to join the team."
A very standard script.
Right. But I want you to think about the script you use in your own native language when you meet someone new. Maybe it's at a networking event, a conference, or a dinner party. Think about the exact sequence of words you use.
We all have one.
Is your introduction truly spontaneous? Or, over the years, have you unknowingly developed a highly refined, well-rehearsed set of opening moves?
That's a great question.
How much of our daily quote-unquote natural interaction is just a pre-written script we've memorized to manage our own social anxiety and lower our own affective filters?
Probably more than we think.
And how does analyzing a beginner's language guide expose the hidden automated mechanics of our everyday conversations? Keep that in mind the next time you extend your hand, make direct eye contact, and introduce yourself to a stranger. Are you speaking freely, or are you just playing the opening moves on the board? Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Welcome to the Morning English Podcast. Listen, learn, and speak English daily.
Have you ever had that experience where you decide you're going to completely master something new?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you get incredibly motivated, you buy all the books, you download the software.
They watch like hours of tutorial videos.
Exactly, hours of them. And you sit there in your room, just entirely isolated, studying the theory, looking at the diagrams, and in your head, you feel like an absolute prodigy.
You think you've got it all figured out.
You do. You understand the mechanics flawlessly on paper, but then the inevitable happens.
You actually do.
You have to step out into the physical world and perform the task in real time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's hitting a golf ball, or maybe it's writing a line of code without an autocompleter, or, maybe it's speaking a new language. And what happens? You just, you completely and utterly freeze.
It's a staggering reality check, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, that sudden paralysis, you have all this data stored in your prefrontal cortex, and yet your body or your mouth simply refuses to execute.
It's like a disconnect.
Completely. We operate under this very logical, but honestly completely flawed assumption that if we just hold enough raw data in our minds, the real-time application of that data will just naturally follow.
Like downloading a file.
Right. We treat the human brain like a computer hard drive. But moving from passive intellectual understanding to active, real-time physical execution It requires an entirely different set of neurological pathways.
The transition isn't automatic.
No, not at all. It actually requires a bridge that, frankly, most people never bothered to build.
And that missing bridge is exactly what we are dissecting today. Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. We are looking at a stack of excerpts from a text called Foundations of Daily English Conversation Practice.
Which is a fascinating document.
It is. Now, I know what you might be thinking listening to this. If you already speak English fluently, or if you aren't currently trying to learn a new language, why are we looking at a beginner's language guide?
That's a fair question.
I had the exact same reaction when we first pulled this source material. I thought, okay, this is going to have a dry list of vocabulary words and grammar rules.
Which is the standard format for almost every language textbook on the market, honestly.
Yeah.
But reading through these foundations, it becomes clear very quickly that this isn't just about English. The author is actually outlining a highly sophisticated sequential framework for skill acquisition.
Yes.
It just happens to be using the English language as its primary vehicle.
It's a blueprint.
Exactly. The psychological barriers, it addresses things like the paralyzing fear of looking foolish, the inefficiency of binge studying, the cognitive friction of real-time processing. These are universal bottlenecks.
Whether you're trying to learn conversational Spanish or master a martial art or just learn how to public speak.
The mechanics of getting over your own ego and forcing your brain to adapt to a new active skill are exactly the same across the board.
So, the mission for this deep dive is to look past the literal vocabulary lessons here and extract the underlying psychology. We need to figure out why the simple act of opening your mouth to speak is so much more cognitively demanding than reading a page of text.
Right.
And we're going to examine why the author insists that practicing wildly mundane phrases like, talking about brushing your teeth is actually a clinical tool for hacking your brain's retrieval system.
We essentially want to decode the architecture of fluency.
I like that, the architecture of fluency.
Not just linguistic fluency, but behavioral fluency. How do you take a complex, highly intimidating endeavor and chop it down into such microscopic, non-threatening steps that your brain doesn't trigger a stress response?
Let's start right there with that stress response. Because the text introduces a concept early on that I'm going to loosely call the hesitation gap.
That's a great term for it.
The author makes this very pointed observation about beginners. They note that a student can often read a passage of English perfectly. They can sit in a cafe, listen to a native speaker, and comprehend almost everything being said.
Yes, their comprehension is high.
But the second that same student is prompted to reply, there's this agonizing pause. They freeze. And frankly, this seems kind of counterintuitive to me.
How so?
Well, if the vocabulary is already in their head, if they just prove they know the words by understanding the person speaking to them, why can't they just say the words back?
Because you're conflating two fundamentally different cognitive processes.
Okay, break that down for me.
The author is very careful to distinguish between passive absorption and active generation. When you are reading or listening, you are engaging in passive skills. The information is being fed to you.
Right.
Your brain gets to sit back and decode that information at a relatively comfortable pace. If you're reading, you can pause, you can reread a sentence or use context clues. There's zero external pressure.
You're in control of the timeline.
Exactly. But speaking is a highly active, concurrent processing event.
Wait, concurrent processing, meaning the brain is doing multiple heavy lifting tasks at the exact same millisecond.
Precisely. To speak, you have to first ideate the thought. Then you have to sift through your mental database to retrieve the correct vocabulary.
Which takes time.
Yes. Then you have to organize those words using the correct syntactical rules. And then, and this is a part people always forget, you have to send complex motor commands to your diaphragm, your vocal cords, your tongue, and your lips to physically produce the sounds.
Physical.
It's highly physical. And on top of all that, you are actively monitoring the facial expressions of the person you are talking to, adjusting your tone based on their reactions.
That is a lot.
It is a massive multi-lane highway of cognitive load. So when the learner hesitates, it's not because they don't know the word apple.
Right.
It's because their processing system is redlining. It's overwhelmed by the real-time coordination of all those different tasks.
So the hesitation is basically the brain's buffering symbol.
That is exactly what it is.
It's a hardware limitation, not a software limitation. You have the software, you know the vocabulary, but your RAM is completely maxed out.
Spot on.
And that leads directly to a massive trap that the text highlights. The author points out that when learners hit this hesitation gap, their immediate instinct is to retreat back to the books.
Yes, the comfort zone.
They think, I froze because I don't know enough grammar. If I just memorize 20 more irregular verbs or study the past perfect continuous tense for another hour, I won't hesitate next time.
It's a completely logical self-diagnosis, but as the text argues, it's entirely wrong.
Completely backwards.
The author emphasizes that a language becomes strong through use, not just through isolated study. Going back to your computer analogy, memorizing more grammar rules is just stuffing more files into a deeply buried folder on your hard drive.
It doesn't upgrade your RAM.
It doesn't improve your processor speed at all. When you're standing face-to-face with a native speaker, having an encyclopedic knowledge of grammar rules won't help you if you haven't built the neural pathways required for rapid retrieval.
I see what you're saying, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If you don't aggressively study the grammar and the rules, isn't your spoken language just going to be a chaotic mess of disconnected words? You need the foundation, don't you?
You need a basic framework, absolutely. But the text isn't saying grammar is useless. It's warning against using grammar study as an avoidance tactic.
Using it to hide.
Exactly. People retreat to grammar books because reading a book is safe. You can't be embarrassed by a book. You can't stutter in front of a book.
The book doesn't judge you.
It doesn't. The author is pushing the learner to realize that the chaos, the messiness, the stuttering, that isn't a sign that you need more book study. That messy execution is the actual learning process.
Which brings us to what I genuinely think is the most clarifying analogy in the entire source material.
The bicycle.
Yes, the bicycle. The text compares this whole dynamic to learning how to ride a bicycle. The author writes, "You cannot learn only by reading instructions. You must practice again and again."
It's a perfect metaphor.
I want to really sit with this image for a second. Imagine you decide you want to learn how to ride a bike, but you refuse to actually get on one.
Right.
Instead, you sit on your couch and read a dense 400-page manual on the physics of cycling. You memorize the vector forces. You understand the gyroscopic effect of the wheels. You calculate the exact coefficient of friction required for the rubber tires to grip the asphalt.
Theoretically, you are an absolute master of the bicycle. You could ace a written university exam on the mechanics of cycling.
Right. But the moment you walk outside, throw your leg over the saddle and lift your feet off the pavement, what's going to happen?
You crash.
You're going to immediately crash into the nearest mailbox. All that theoretical physics knowledge is instantly rendered useless.
Because your body doesn't know what balance feels like. Your inner ear hasn't experienced the specific sensation of tipping to the left and needing to compensate by shifting your weight to the right. Your nervous system hasn't mapped the micro adjustments required in your core muscles.
The physical mapping is missing.
The source material is using this analogy to point out a harsh truth about language. Speaking is profoundly physical. It is a motor skill as much as it is an intellectual one. When the author insists that speaking every day trains your brain to respond naturally, they are talking about building muscle memory.
You are literally pedaling the bike. The words on the page are the physics manual. Actually vibrating your vocal cords and moving your jaw to produce the sound in real time is pedaling the bike.
And if you never pedal, you're never going to ride.
It doesn't matter how vast your vocabulary is. But that leaves us with a massive practical problem.
Which is?
Well, if we know we have to get on the bike and pedal, where do we actually begin? You can't just jump into a high-stakes, hour-long debate about macroeconomics on day one.
Oh no, that would be a disaster.
You'll crash instantly, your confidence will be shattered, and you'll never try again.
Which is exactly why the text pivots into a very systematic, incremental approach. If you throw a beginner into the deep end, their amygdala, the fear center of the brain, hijacks the entire process.
They go into fight or flight mode.
Completely. So the author constructs what we can think of as conversational stepping stones. The goal here is to artificially lower the stakes so significantly that the fear of failure is almost completely neutralized. You have to manufacture early wins.
And the very first stepping stone the text lays out seems almost comically simple.
Oh.
It suggests starting with basic greetings.
Right.
It lists examples like saying good morning, good afternoon, or answering how are you with I am fine or I'm doing well. Now, I'll be honest, reading this, it feels almost too basic to even warrant inclusion. We are talking about the absolute lowest common denominator of human interaction. What is the actual psychological utility of focusing on good morning?
Think back to the cognitive load we discussed earlier, the overwhelming RAM required to formulate a sentence. The brilliance of starting with good morning is that it bypasses almost all of that processing.
How so?
It is a pre-packaged fixed phrase, You aren't analyzing sentence structure. You aren't conjugating a verb. You are simply retrieving a single unbroken block of sound and deploying it.
It's essentially a vocal reflex.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
reflex. But here's the crucial part. Even though it's a reflex, it still initiates a complete interpersonal transaction.
Ah,
You deploy the phrase, the person you're speaking to hears it, processes it, smiles, and says, "Good morning, back." To your nervous system, that is a massive victory.
you communicated.
You have successfully initiated and completed a communication loop in a foreign language. The author relies on these greetings because they are socially predictable and incredibly safe. That small dopamine hit of success begins to chip away at the hesitation gap.
It proves to the brain that speaking this new language doesn't have to result in a catastrophic failure. It's like balancing on the bicycle for exactly 1 second before putting your foot down. It's not a Tour de France stage, but it proves the physics work.
That's a great way to look at it.
Now, from greetings, the text moves into an area that I find endlessly fascinating because it seems so incredibly boring on the surface. The power of the mundane.
The daily routines.
Yes. The author strongly recommends that learners immediately start talking about the most basic routines of their daily life. The examples given are things like answering, "What did you do today?" with, "I went to work," or "I stayed at home."
This is a very deliberate escalation in difficulty. You are transitioning away from prepackaged reflexes like "good morning" and moving into active sentence construction.
But keeping it safe.
Exactly. You are doing it within the safest possible parameters. When you say, "I went to work," you have to select a pronoun, retrieve a past tense verb, and attach a destination. You are actively building the architecture of a thought, but because the subject matter is so deeply familiar to you, the cognitive strain is minimized.
And the text pushes this focus on the mundane even further by highlighting morning routines. It literally suggests practicing phrases out loud like, "I wake up at 7 in the morning, I brush my teeth, I take a shower, and I eat breakfast."
Yes.
Look, nobody wants to have a conversation about brushing their teeth. It's not insightful, it's not charming. Why is the author insisting that an adult learner spend time reciting the actions of a toddler?
Because fluency isn't about your ability to deploy rare, esoteric vocabulary. True fluency is the ability to instantly and effortlessly retrieve the most common, high-frequency words in human existence.
The bedrock words.
Right. By reciting, "I brush my teeth," or "I take a shower," the learner is forcing their brain to repeatedly fire the neural circuits associated with core physical actions. The author is using the sheer repetitiveness of a morning routine as a built-in training mechanism.
Because you do it every day?
You brush your teeth every single day. If you practice saying the phrase while you do it, you are anchoring the abstract vocabulary to a highly specific daily physical reality.
It's like a musician practicing scales.
That's exactly it.
A concert pianist doesn't walk out on stage at Carnegie Hall and just play a C major scale for the audience. But they practice that scale 10,000 times in their living room so that when they are performing a complex concerto, their fingers instinctively know the topography of the keyboard.
Saying "I take a shower" is playing the linguistic scale.
And speaking of daily routines, the text leans heavily into another universal topic: food. It points out that everyone can talk about meals easily. It suggests practicing sentences like, "I ate eggs and toast," "I had cereal," or "I drank coffee."
And again, while the topic seems trivial, look closely at the grammatical machinery hidden inside those simple sentences.
The irregular verbs.
Yes. The author uses food to smuggle in one of the most notoriously difficult aspects of the English language. Irregular past tense verbs. I ate, I had, I drank.
Because they don't follow the standard rule of just adding an ed to the end of a word.
Exactly. Beginners stumble over irregular verbs constantly.
Because they have to pause and search their memory for the specific exception to the rule.
Precisely. But by tying these difficult verbs to the visceral sensory experience of eating breakfast, the author grounds the abstract grammar. It's no longer a sterile rule printed in a textbook. It becomes intrinsically linked to the smell of the coffee or the taste of the eggs you just consumed.
You are taking a complex grammatical exception and tying it to a biological necessity.
It's a brilliant way to force the brain to categorize the information as vital rather than just trivia.
I love that concept of smuggling the complex grammar inside a safe, familiar topic. It's so smart. As the learner masters these highly internal personal routines, the text begins to expand the perimeter.
Moving outward.
Right. It categorizes what I would call the common pillars of social navigation, starting with work and school. He gives examples of common questions like, "Where do you work?" and scripts simple responses like, I work in an office, or I start work at 9 o'clock.
Notice the shift here. We've moved from the private sphere, what I ate when I woke up, into the public sphere. The learner is now practicing how to define their identity and their societal role to a stranger.
Which is usually where social anxiety really kicks in.
It is. Social anxiety usually compounds linguistic anxiety. But the author's strategy here is essentially preloading. In any culture, when you meet someone new, the odds are extraordinarily high that they will ask what you do for a living.
It's guaranteed.
By rigorously practicing these specific responses, the learner is pre-calculating the conversation. When the question inevitably comes up in real life, they don't have to panic and invent a sentence from scratch. They just hit play on the preloaded script.
It drastically reduces the latency in the conversation, which makes the learner feel competent.
Yeah.
And to flesh out that social identity, the text introduces hobbies.
Right, what you do for fun.
It says, hobbies make conversations more interesting because they show what people enjoy doing in their free time. Things like, I like reading books, or I play football. But the crucial detail the text highlights here is that discussing hobbies naturally generates follow-up questions.
This is a major evolutionary leap in the learner's journey.
How so?
Well, up until this point in the text, almost every example has been a one-way declarative statement. I ate this. I work here. It's transactional. But a follow-up question fundamentally alters the dynamic.
Because you don't know what they're going to ask.
Exactly. It requires the learner to actively listen, decode an unscripted inquiry, and formulate a relevant contextual response. The author notes that this keeps the conversation flowing naturally. This is the moment the training wheels start to come off.
You're actually conversing.
The learner is no longer just reciting. They are engaging in a dynamic, unpredictable tennis match of communication.
Hitting the ball back over the net rather than just serving it and walking away. But what happens when you drop the ball? What happens when the rally dies and you're standing there in awkward silence?
The weather.
The weather. The text offers the ultimate conversational life raft. The weather. It is sunny today. The weather is very cold. It is raining outside. It's almost a cliche to talk about the weather when you have nothing else to say, but the author strongly endorses it as a learning tool.
It's a cliche for a reason. The weather is the ultimate shared reality. You don't need to navigate cultural nuances. You don't need to know anything about the other person's background. And there's absolutely zero risk of accidentally wandering into a controversial or offensive topic.
It is entirely neutral ground.
From a linguistic standpoint, the author values weather talk because it forces the learner to practice simple state-of-being descriptions. You are using basic adjectives to describe the current physical environment. It's an incredibly safe sandbox for practicing sentence structure while simultaneously fulfilling the social obligation of keeping the interaction alive.
Okay, so we've established these stepping stones for social bonding. Routines, work, hobbies, the weather. But what if the stakes are higher?
Survival skills.
Yes. What if you aren't just trying to be polite, but you actually need to survive in a new environment? The text categorizes a set of practical survival skills. Starting with shopping, it provides scripts for navigating a store. How much does this cost? Or, do you have this in another color? And it prepares the learner for the responses. It costs $10. Or, yes, we have it in blue.
If we look at the psychological friction of moving to a new country or navigating a foreign environment, these transactional interactions are where the most acute panic occurs.
Oh, absolutely. The anxiety of holding up a line.
Yes. If you mess up a greeting at a party, it's slightly awkward. But if you walk into a market and you physically cannot ask how much a bottle of water costs, or you can't decipher the number the cashier says back to you, your sense of autonomy completely collapses.
You're stuck.
You become fundamentally dependent on others. The text focuses on these specific transactional scripts because mastering them restores the learner's agency. It allows them to procure the basic necessities of life without feeling helpless.
Restoring agency. That is such a powerful way to frame it. You aren't just learning numbers, you are learning how to survive independently. And that maps perfectly onto the next survival skill the text covers, which is asking for directions.
Crucial.
The examples are classic. Where is the nearest bus stop? Or how can I get to the train station? And then bracing for the geographical responses like go straight, turn left, or it is next to the bank.
Navigating physical space in a second language is a profoundly complex cognitive mapping exercise. Think about what is happening in the brain here. You have to vocalize your desired destination, carefully parse the stream of directional vocabulary coming back at you, convert those auditory signals into a three-dimensional mental map, and then translate that map into physical movement through an unfamiliar city.
It's a massive amount of processing.
It is a high-stakes, real-world application of the language. When a learner successfully asks for directions and actually arrives at the train station, it isn't just a linguistic victory, it's a massive psychological triumph. The geographic boundaries of their world literally expand.
I can completely visualize that feeling. The absolute terror of being lost in a strange city, followed by the immense relief of successfully asking a stranger for help and understanding their gestures and words. It completely changes your relationship with the environment.
It does.
Now, as the learner secures this foundation of survival and basic social interaction, the text nudges them to expand their structural complexity. It suggests practicing by describing immediate surroundings, looking around a room and explicitly stating, "There is a table near the window," or "My bed is next to the wall." Why the focus on furniture placement?
It's an exercise in spatial prepositions. Words like near, next to, on, and under are notoriously slippery for language learners.
They really are. They don't translate one-to-one.
Exactly. Direct translation of prepositions often fails catastrophically between languages because different cultures conceptualize spatial relationships differently. By forcing the learner to sit in a room and verbally label the physical relationships between the objects around them, the author is demanding that they actively observe and map their environment using the new linguistic framework.
So you have to connect the word directly to the spatial reality.
It's a solitary practice, but it's essential for building a robust structural foundation. You are mapping reality to the new vocabulary.
And the final stepping stone in this section asks the learner to make the biggest cognitive leap of all. It pushes them to step entirely out of the present moment and talk about the future.
The future tense.
Right. The text provides examples like, "Tomorrow I will go to the market, I will meet my friend," or "I will study English tonight."
Up until this point, the learner has been locked in the concrete reality of the present. What they see, what they are doing, or the immediate past, like what they just ate. Introducing future plans requires practicing the future tense, which involves a higher level of abstract thinking.
Because it hasn't happened yet.
You are trying to articulate a reality that does not yet exist. However, the author brilliantly tethers this abstract grammar to mundane, highly predictable events like going to the market or studying. They are introducing a complex grammatical concept, but keeping the subject matter completely grounded, preventing the learner from becoming overwhelmed by too many new variables at once.
Okay, so let's take a breath and look at the architecture we've built so far. We've laid out the whats. We know to start with greetings, move to mundane routines like eggs and toast, secure our survival with shopping and directions, and finally expand into future plans.
The content is mapped.
We have the content. But now, as we move into section 3 of our deep dive, the source material pivots dramatically. It stops telling us what to say and starts telling us exactly how to train our brains to say it.
The active techniques.
It introduces the active techniques for daily practice.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, for a text dedicated to speaking, the first major technique it focuses on is listening.
It's a necessary paradox. You cannot accurately produce a sound or a structure that your brain hasn't first thoroughly absorbed. The text states very plainly that listening is a vital component of conversation practice. But it's important to understand the specific type of listening the author is advocating for.
It's not passive.
No, this isn't about throwing on a podcast in the background while you wash the dishes and just hoping the language seeps into your brain through osmosis.
Right. It specifies that when you listen carefully, you understand how sentences are structured and how words are pronounced. It's highly analytical listening.
Exactly. You are listening to decode the architecture of the speech. You are observing the cadence, noticing which syllables are stressed, how native speakers compress certain words together, where they pause for breath.
Building a model.
You are building an auditory template in your mind. The text recommends using English podcasts, conversations, and videos to become familiar with natural speech patterns. This active listening calibrates your brain's expectations so you know what the language is actually supposed to sound like, rather than what a textbook says it sounds like.
It's the difference between reading sheet music and actually listening to a jazz band perform the song. You have to hear the swing of the notes.
That's a great comparison.
But listening alone doesn't fix the hesitation gap. You have to eventually open your mouth. And this is where the text introduces a technique that I find absolutely fascinating. It's a method called shadowing.
Shadowing is arguably the most aggressively active, physically demanding technique in the entire source material. It is the direct bridge between passive absorption and active generation.
For those of you listening who haven't encountered this concept before, the text defines it with brutal simplicity. Shadowing means listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately. That is the entire instruction.
Just do it.
You listen to a native speaker audio track, and a fraction of a second later, you mimic the sounds they are making, speaking almost simultaneously over the track. It sounds chaotic. I tried to imagine doing this, and the cognitive friction seems incredibly high. Why on earth does this parrot-like mimicking work so well?
It works precisely because it forces you to bypass the analytical, translation-obsessed part of your brain. When a beginner reads words on a page, their brain instinctively overlays the rhythm, the intonation, and the vowel sounds of their native language onto those new words.
They bring their own baggage to the words.
They are applying old software to new data. Shadowing violently disrupts that process. Because you are forcing yourself to repeat the audio signal immediately, with only a millisecond delay, you literally do not have the time to stop, analyze the grammar, or think about what the word means in your native tongue.
Your brain is moving too fast to overthink it.
Exactly. You are engaging the pure mimicry centers of your neurological system. You are treating the language entirely as a musical performance, not an intellectual puzzle. The text explicitly points out that this method improves pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence.
Because you're just physically doing it.
You are physically training the muscles of your jaw, your tongue, and your vocal cords to move in unfamiliar patterns, guided in real time by the native speaker's audio. It forces you to abandon your internal native rhythm and adopt the authentic physical cadence of the target language. It's essentially forced immersion for your vocal apparatus.
That concept of bypassing the analytical brain connects perfectly to what I think is the most profound psychological advice in this entire text. If you only take one thing away from this deep dive, let it be this next point.
The translation trap.
The text addresses the single biggest mental roadblock that causes that hesitation gap we talked about at the beginning. I call it the translation trap.
It is the ultimate bottleneck in language acquisition. The source material delivers a very clear directive here. Instead of translating every thought from your native language, try to form simple thoughts directly in English.
Which sounds lovely, but it also sounds impossible when you're a beginner. Yet, the text provides these beautiful, grounding examples. It says, for example, when you see the sky, you can think, the sky is blue today. When you feel hungry, you can think, I want to eat something.
It's about direct association.
Now, looking at this, I have to ask, why is the text so hostile to translation? If I speak Spanish and I see the sky, my brain naturally thinks azul. Why is it so inherently damaging to just let my brain think azul, translate that to blue, and then speak? Well, what is the actual danger there?
The danger is latency, cognitive delay. Let's break down the mechanics of the translation trap you just described. If you rely on translation, every single time you want to participate in a conversation, your brain has to execute a grueling, multi-step process. First, you receive the auditory input. Second, you translate that input into your native language to understand it. Third, you formulate your response in your native language. Fourth, you search your mental dictionary for the foreign equivalents of those words. Fifth, you apply the foreign grammatical rules to those words. And finally, sixth, you articulate the sentence.
That sounds exhausting. Just hearing the steps makes me tired.
It is exhausting. And more importantly, that 6-step process takes time. It takes milliseconds, sometimes entire seconds. That latency is the hesitation gap. That is why you are standing there staring blankly while the other person waits for an answer.
You're running the 6-step program in your head.
By forcing yourself to think in English, by looking at the sky and demanding your brain bypass the native word and directly access the concept of blue, you are eliminating the middleman. You are cutting the 6-step process down to a 2-step process. Ideate the thought. Articulate the thought.
You are building a direct neural highway between the visual stimulus of the sky and the English word, rather than taking the detour through your native language.
Precisely. The text explicitly notes that this habit trains your brain to process English naturally. It drastically reduces the cognitive load, which in turn drastically reduces the hesitation. You stop treating the language as a code that needs to be decrypted and start treating it as a direct expression of your reality.
It's the difference between navigating a city by constantly staring at a map versus just knowing the route because you've driven it 100 times. You want the language to be the territory, not the map.
Beautifully put.
Now, all these techniques, shadowing, thinking directly in the language, are very solitary pursuits. But the text eventually pushes the learner back out into the real world. It highlights the immense value of the feedback loop, stating that practicing with a partner is crucial because asking and answering questions creates a real conversation environment.
Because a solo environment is, by definition, a controlled environment. You are in charge of the pacing and the variables. A partner introduces chaos.
The good chaos.
A partner introduces unpredictability. When you speak with a human being, you have to dynamically react to their tone, their unexpected vocabulary choices, and their pace. It forces all those isolated skills you've been practicing to synthesize in real time under pressure. Furthermore, the text mentions that partners can correct mistakes gently. That external, gentle correction is vital to prevent a learner from permanently cementing incorrect grammatical structures or poor pronunciation into their muscle memory.
But the author also recognizes that not everyone is a native speaker sitting in their living room ready to practice. The text heavily advocates for leaning on modern tools. It mentions mobile apps, online courses, and watching videos with subtitles, which allows you to visually map the spoken audio to the written words simultaneously.
All great tools.
However, buried in this section about tools is one specific technique that I found simultaneously brilliant and absolutely terrifying.
What?
The text suggests that the learner should build a habit of recording themselves speaking.
Oh, yes. It is a universally dreaded exercise, regardless of whether you are learning a language, practicing a speech, or learning an instrument. Confronting a recording of yourself is inherently uncomfortable.
Oh, it's the worst. Everyone despises the sound of their own voice on tape. Why is the author forcing this kind of psychological torture on a beginner?
Because it forces an encounter with objective reality. When we speak, our perception of our own voice is severely distorted. We hear the sound vibrating through the bones in our skull, which makes our voice sound deeper, more resonant, and often much more accurate than it actually is.
It's an acoustic illusion.
The cognitive bias is very strong. We think we sound like the native speakers we've been shadowing. The recording strips away that bone conduction illusion. The text states, when you record your voice, you can listen to your pronunciation and identify areas for improvement.
So it's about breaking delusion. You have to hear the awkward pauses, the mispronounced vowels, the robotic cadence.
Exactly. You become your own auditor. You might be convinced you are pronouncing the TH sound perfectly, but the recording reveals you are actually saying a D sound. It is an uncomfortable but radically necessary tool for self-correction. As the text notes, it builds acute self-awareness of exactly how you are currently performing, which is the only baseline from which you can actually improve.
It's the linguistic equivalent of an athlete watching game tape to fix their throwing mechanics.
You can't fix a flaw you refuse to look at.
Okay, so we have the stepping stones, we have the active techniques, we are shadowing, we are banishing the translation trap, we are enduring the horror of our own voice memos. We are finally arriving at the fourth and final section of this deep dive. And arguably, this is the linchpin of the entire framework.
The psychology.
Section 4 addresses the psychology of consistency and overcoming fear. Because let's be honest, you can have the best techniques in the world, but if your psychological approach is flawed, you will inevitably burn out and quit. The author drops a massive counterintuitive rule right at the top of this section, the 15-minute rule.
This rule directly assaults the traditional academic model of studying that most of us were raised with. The text boldly asserts consistency is more important than long study sessions. It goes on to specifically prescribe practicing for 15 to 20 minutes every day, claiming this is vastly more effective than studying for several hours once a week.
Let's do the math on that because it feels wrong. If I study 15 minutes a day, 7 days a week, that's an hour and 45 minutes of total practice time. If I lock myself in a room on Sunday and cram for 3 straight hours, I'm putting in almost double the total time. How can the author logically argue that the shorter duration yields a better result?
It comes down to how the human brain actually consolidates memory and builds new neural architecture. The brain does not respond well to massive, infrequent floods of data. If you study for 3 hours on a Sunday, you overload the hippocampus. It simply cannot process, categorize, and store all of those new vocabulary words and grammar rules in one sitting.
So the bucket just overflows.
The majority of that data will spill over and be forgotten by Monday morning. Furthermore, by Wednesday or Thursday, the neural pathways you did manage to create will have significantly degraded because they haven't been reactivated.
So the 3-hour binge is mostly wasted effort.
It's highly inefficient. The text explains the underlying mechanism perfectly. Daily exposure keeps the language fresh in your mind and helps you remember vocabulary better. This is the principle of spaced repetition. By engaging with the language for just 15 minutes every single day, you are repeatedly sending a signal to your brain that this specific information is critical for your daily functioning.
Use it or lose it.
Frequent activation forces the brain to myelinate those specific neural pathways, making them stronger, faster, and more permanent. The consistency triggers the biological process of long-term memory consolidation, much of which actually happens while you sleep between those daily sessions.
It's the difference between watering a houseplant with a few ounces of water every single morning versus dumping a massive 5-gallon bucket of water on it once a month. The volume of water in the bucket is higher, but the plant will drown and then dry out and die. The consistency is the actual mechanism of growth.
Perfectly said.
But here's the catch. To maintain that 50-minute daily habit, a learner has to confront and overcome a massive, looming psychological hurdle. The text identifies it bluntly, the fear of making mistakes. It notes that many people worry about using the wrong grammar or mispronouncing words, and that this worry can completely paralyze their progress.
This is the deepest psychological barrier in any form of skill acquisition, not just language. From a very young age, our educational systems and social structures condition us to view mistakes as catastrophic failures. A mistake is a red X on a test. It's evidence of incompetence. It's a reason for peers to laugh at you. The ego develops a highly reactive defense mechanism to protect us from looking foolish in front of the tribe.
It's self-preservation.
But the author introduces a radical reframing of this concept. The text offers a crucial psychological intervention. Mistakes are a natural part of learning. Every mistake is an opportunity to improve.
Every mistake is an opportunity to improve. It sounds like a motivational poster, but in this context, it's actually an operational instruction.
It is an absolute requirement for fluency. You have to dismantle the ego's defense mechanism. The author goes further to normalize this reality by pointing out that even fluent speakers sometimes make mistakes. This is meant to destroy the learner's illusion that perfection is the baseline. If a beginner sets flawless grammar as the prerequisite for opening their mouth, they will remain silent forever because perfection is biologically impossible at that stage. The text is urging the learner to understand the true ultimate goal.
Which is?
The goal of spoken language is not grammatical perfection. The goal is the successful transfer of meaning.
If I use the completely wrong past tense verb and I mangle the pronunciation, but the shopkeeper still understands that I want to buy the water, the communication was successful.
Exactly. The transaction was completed. The mistake wasn't a failure. It was simply a data point. It revealed a gap in your mapping that you can now observe and correct. If you hide from the mistakes, you hide from the data required to improve. You have to willingly subject yourself to looking foolish. You have to embrace the clumsiness of the beginner if you ever want to achieve the grace of the expert.
It requires a profound level of humility. And that humility must be paired with enormous patience, which is the next concept the text emphasizes. It delivers a sobering yet deeply encouraging reality check. Improvement does not happen overnight.
It's managing expectations. The author is validating the agonizing friction of the early stages. The text acknowledges that at first, you may struggle to find the right words. You may speak slowly or make mistakes. This validation is critical for the learner's mental endurance. When they are struggling to remember the word for breakfast on week 2, they need to know that this struggle is not a symptom of their own inherent inadequacy.
It's just the process.
It is simply the mandatory terrain that every learner must cross. But the author immediately anchors that struggle to the inevitable reward. But with regular practice, your confidence and fluency will grow. Every conversation brings you closer to your goal.
And what exactly is that ultimate goal? As the source material comes to a close, it pans the camera out beautifully. We spent all this time focused on the micromechanics shadowing audio tracks, memorizing irregular verbs, describing eggs and toast, asking where the bus stop is. But the text pulls back to reveal the macro impact. It states, learning English opens many opportunities in life. It breaks out of the narrow view of language as an academic chore.
It reframes the language entirely. It is no longer just a subject to be studied, it is a skeleton key that unlocks reality. The text enumerates these vast, life-altering benefits, noting that it allows you to communicate with people from different countries, travel more easily, and access global information. It highlights its critical role in business, education, and technology. By placing these massive intrinsic rewards at the end of the text, the author is providing the psychological fuel required to sustain that grinding 15-minute daily habit.
You need that why.
When you are sitting alone in your room, exhausted, recording your own voice and confronting your mistakes, you aren't just practicing a verb conjugation, you are systematically dismantling the geographic and cultural walls that confine your life.
Daily English conversation practice is not just about learning a language. It is about building confidence, connecting with people, and expanding your world. That summary line from the text itself is incredibly potent. It brings the entire exhaustive process full circle.
It perfectly maps the transformation the author is promising. The text guarantees that this daily practice transforms beginners into confident speakers. It assures the learner that the paralyzing fear will eventually dissipate, the vocabulary will naturally compound, and those agonizingly deliberate, clumsy conversations will eventually become fluid and unconscious. It stands as a testament to the compounding power of consistent, incremental, fearless effort.
So let's pull all of these threads together and recap the massive journey we've taken through this deep dive. We started by confronting the reality of the hesitation gap, that frustrating canyon, between knowing the theory of a skill and actually executing it under pressure. We realized that memorizing the physics of a bicycle will never teach your body how to balance, and that the only way to learn is to get on the saddle and pedal, regardless of how wobbly you are. We mapped out the stepping stones, discovering how the most mundane topics imaginable, deploying prepackaged greetings, reciting your morning routine, anchoring your regular verbs to your breakfast, are actually highly sophisticated tools for hacking your brain's retrieval system and building the architecture of fluency without triggering an anxiety response.
We dissected the active techniques the author provided. We looked at how analytical listening allows you to observe the structural rhythm of the language, and how the aggressive, immediate mimicry of the shadowing technique forces your physical muscles to adapt while bypassing the over-analytical brain. We explored the critical necessity of escaping the translation trap, cutting out the cognitive latency by building direct neural pathways between the concept and the target language. We discussed the unpredictability of partner practice and the uncomfortable but utterly vital necessity of confronting objective reality by recording your own voice.
And finally, we unpacked the psychological resilience required to make any of this work. We broke down the neurology behind the 15-minute rule, proving that daily, consistent exposure builds stronger neural pathways than hours of sporadic cramming. We fundamentally reframed the concept of mistakes, viewing them not as catastrophic failures that wound our ego, but as essential, neutral data points required for course correction. And we reminded ourselves of the patience required to endure the clumsy beginner phase in order to eventually unlock a vastly expanded, interconnected world. The framework is clear. Lower the stakes, build the daily habit, embrace the mistakes, and the fluency will inevitably follow.
Ultimately, the source material serves as an engine of empowerment. It takes the overwhelming, monolithic mountain of mastering a new language, demystifies it, and breaks it down into a sequence of actionable, daily, and highly achievable behavioral habits.
It truly is a masterclass in the psychology of skill acquisition. Now, as we wrap up this incredibly deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. It's inspired by our deep dive into the translation trap and the text's forceful advice to think directly in the new language, to look at the sky and instinctively generate the new word, completely bypassing your native tongue. If you train your brain to do that, if you successfully rewire your neural pathways to process information and conceptualize reality directly through the vocabulary and syntax of a completely different culture, it raises a profound, almost philosophical question. How might learning a new language actually change the core of who you are and how you perceive reality?
It's a huge question.
Think about that for a second. If you aren't just translating words, but actually adopting a new structural framework for thought, does it alter your personality? Do you become a slightly different version of yourself when you speak it? I invite you to experiment with this tomorrow. As you go through your perfectly mundane morning routine, as you brush your teeth and eat your breakfast, try to experience those deeply familiar moments entirely through the lens of whatever new skill or language you are trying to master. How does it change the emotional resonance of the routine? How does it recontextualize the objects sitting on your desk? It is a deeply fascinating concept to explore on your own. Really powerful stuff. Thank you so much for joining us for this extensive deep dive into the foundations of daily practice and the hidden mechanics of skill acquisition. We hope this breakdown has given you the clarity and the psychological tools to overcome your own hesitation gap. So get out there, embrace the awkwardness, get on the bicycle, and start pedaling. Until next time, keep exploring, Keep questioning the mechanics of how you learn. And absolutely, do not be afraid to make a massive mess of mistakes along the way.
Welcome to the Morning English Podcast. Listen, learn, and speak English daily.
Right now, as you are listening to this, your brain is acting like a hoarder.
A hoarder.
Yeah, a hoarder. I mean, think about it. If you have ever tried to learn a new language or, honestly, any complex new skill, you have probably spent hours stockpiling things.
Oh, right. The endless vocabulary list.
Exactly. Thousands of foreign vocabulary words, grammar rules, conjugations, and you just pack them all away into this massive locked vault in your head.
And you think you're doing a great job because the vault is so full.
Right. But here is the problem. When you are actually standing in front of another human being and they look you in the eye and say a simple hello,
The vault slams shut.
it slams completely shut. The combination is gone. You are officially locked out of your own mind.
It is a profoundly frustrating thing and honestly a universally human experience. You spend weeks, maybe months, meticulously organizing these flashcards.
Yeah.
You know the theoretical rules perfectly. You have built this magnificent library of data, but there is absolutely no librarian.
No librarian to help you retrieve the right book.
Exactly. There is no one to find the book when someone is standing right in front of you, just waiting for a response in real time.
I have lived this nightmare. I have to tell you, a few years ago, I was in Paris.
Oh no, I can already tell where this is going.
It was awful. I had spent 6 months using every app, every textbook I could find. I was acing all the quizzes. I felt like an absolute linguistic genius, in the safety of my own living room.
Which is a very safe, controlled environment.
Totally. And then I walked into a real, actual boulangerie. The smell of the croissants is hitting me. There is a line of very impatient Parisians behind me. And the lady behind the counter looks at me and says something incredibly basic.
Just asking what you want to order.
Literally just asking what I want. And my brain it blue screened. Completely wiped.
The classic freeze response.
I stood there sweating, actively knowing that I knew the word for bread, but I could not physically get my mouth to make the sound.
Yeah.
I ended up just pointing and grunting like a caveman, grabbing a pastry, and literally running out of the store.
Which perfectly illustrates what we call the diagnostic muddy waters of education. We think we are learning, right, but we are actually just archiving.
Just archiving. Wow. That is exactly what it feels like.
The transition from that theoretical archived knowledge to real-time practical application, that is where the vast majority of adult learners hit an impenetrable brick wall.
You are putting files into a cabinet that you cannot open when it actually matters.
Yeah.
And, well, that exact paralysis is what we are tackling today.
It is a great topic.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a truly fascinating stack of sources. We have a comprehensive educational guide that completely deconstructs the mechanics of learning English, or frankly, any language or complex skill.
And it does so through conversational audio and podcasts, which is the really interesting part.
Right. We are pulling from insights provided by the British Council, the Cambridge Dictionary, Oxford Learners Dictionaries, and some incredibly granular research from Harvard Language Learning.
It is a phenomenally robust collection of linguistic research and practical behavioral methodology, too.
Yeah. And what I find most compelling as we synthesize these materials is that these massive, prestigious institutions are all pointing toward a remarkably accessible solution.
An almost deceptively simple solution to that exact freeze response you experienced in the bakery.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly why listening to two people casually chat about, say, a summer vacation is actually a highly engineered method for language acquisition.
It is scientifically backed, even if it just sounds like small talk.
Exactly. We want to understand how anyone, and I mean anyone, whether you are picking up Spanish for a trip or trying to master a completely different type of cognitive skill, can use these auditory strategies to bypass that mental block.
Completely bypass the vault.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we are moving far, far away from the traditional classroom model today, we are exploring why natural spoken dialogue is the ultimate shortcut to fluency.
And to really understand why that shortcut works, we cannot just look at the words themselves.
We have to look at the brain, right?
Yes. We have to look at the neuroscience and the underlying biological strategy of audio learning.
Which our sources dive right into.
They do. The insights drawn from the TESOL International Association emphatically state that audio-based learning significantly improves both listening comprehension and vocabulary acquisition.
But the vital question here is, well, why? Why does listening to a podcast work fundamentally better than reading that exact same dialogue in a textbook.
Right, because on the surface, that makes no sense.
It really does not. Reading a script and listening to a script seem like they should deliver the exact same data to your brain. I mean, the words on the page are identical to the words being spoken.
They are identical in meaning, yes, but the delivery mechanism radically changes how your neural pathways process and store those words.
Okay, break that down for me.
The sources introduce this core concept of functional English. This is language used for practical, everyday purposes.
Like ordering bread.
Exactly. According to the research, context-based conversations help the brain retain vocabulary far more effectively than isolated memorization.
Because it changes the categorization, right?
Precisely. When you read a list of words on a flashcard, your brain stores them as abstract, floating concepts. They're just data points.
Like trivia.
Yes. But when you hear those words used in a dynamic, flowing conversation, your brain immediately categorizes them as tools.
Oh, that is interesting.
They become instruments used to achieve a specific social goal.
That makes an incredible amount of sense. It is like, okay, imagine you are trying to learn how to drive a car.
Okay.
You could lock yourself in a room for a year and memorize an entire dictionary of car parts. You could learn exactly what the alternator
You
does.
know everything about it.
Right. You can memorize the exact circumference of the steering wheel, the chemical composition of the brake pads, the fluid dynamics of the transmission.
You would have a flawless encyclopedic understanding of the vehicle.
Exactly. I could quiz you on it, and you would get an A+.
Yeah.
But if I take you out of that room and drop you in the driver's seat of a manual transmission car on a busy highway in the pouring rain,
You are going to crash instantly.
you are going to crash instantly. Knowing the parts does not mean you know how to drive. Learning the language from a vocabulary list is exactly like reading that dictionary of car parts.
It is entirely theoretical.
But listening to a conversational podcast that is like riding in the passenger seat.
Yes.
You are sitting there watching how the driver actually uses the steering wheel and the brakes together.
In real time to navigate through traffic.
Yes, you're experiencing the flow, the rhythm, and the timing of the machine in motion.
That is a phenomenal analogy because you are observing the synthesis of the parts rather than just the isolated components.
Right.
But there is a second, arguably more important layer to why the passenger seat is so effective. And it has to do with the psychological and neurochemical environment that passive audio learning creates.
The environment, you mean like where you are when you listen?
Yes, and what state your brain is in. The sources point out that podcasts offer this incredibly flexible passive learning model. You can listen while you are commuting, while you are at the gym, or while you're just standing at the sink doing the dishes.
Yeah, I listen to podcasts while doing laundry all the time.
And this passive state does something vital. It lowers what linguists and cognitive scientists call the affective filter.
The affective filter. Now, I have to be honest, when I first read that in the research, it sounded like a very expensive attachment you buy for a fish tank.
I can see that.
What exactly is an affective filter in the context of the human brain?
The affective filter is essentially the emotional and biochemical barrier to learning.
So it is a physical barrier.
It acts like one. It is the anxiety, the self-consciousness, the fear of making a mistake, and the dread of social embarrassment that so often blocks language acquisition.
Oh, wow.
When you are sitting at a desk in a traditional classroom, staring at a teacher, waiting in terror to be called on to conjugate a verb in front of 30 other people,
Your affective filter is sky high.
it is through the roof. Your brain is interpreting that environment as a threat.
Oh, absolutely.
Well-
The amygdala is flashing red. The moment a teacher points at you, cortisol just floods your system.
Yes.
That is exactly what happened to me in the Paris bakery. The baker was not a predator, obviously, but my brain treated the social pressure like a life or death situation.
It perceives a threat to your social standing.
I could not remember my own middle name, let alone the French word for baguette.
Precisely. And biologically, when you are in that state of stress, your hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for forming new memories and retrieving information, is actively suppressed.
So the vault actually gets locked by the stress
Yeah,
itself.
exactly. Your brain says, we do not have time to access the French vocabulary archive. We are under attack.
That is wild.
This is why the traditional classroom model fails so many adults. It induces a state of stress that biologically inhibits the ability to absorb or retrieve information. But contrast that with doing the dishes.
Right. When I'm washing a plate, nobody is judging me. My life is not in danger.
Exactly. When you are washing dishes and listening to a podcast, your affective filter is practically non-existent. Your parasympathetic nervous system is engaged.
You are just totally relaxed.
You are relaxed. There is zero pressure to perform, no one is waiting for you to answer, and you cannot make a mistake.
Because you were just listening.
Right. In that deeply relaxed state, your brain's defense mechanisms drop, and it becomes incredibly porous. It is able to naturally absorb the intonation, the rhythm, and the emotional context of the language without resistance.
You were taking in the music of the language, not just the lyrics.
The music of the language. I love that phrasing.
And that ties right into the motivation aspect the sources mention. When you are relaxed and your brain is not fighting off a perceived threat, your motivation to keep going stays exceptionally high.
Because it does not feel like work.
Exactly. You aren't forcing yourself to sit down and study like it is a punishment. You are just eavesdropping on an interesting chat. You are naturally curious.
Which is the ideal state for learning.
So if audio is the ideal vehicle for learning, and it bypasses all of our biological defense mechanisms, what is the best roadmap? If we are going to get in the passenger seat, where exactly are we driving?
Well, the sources point to one universally effective conversational topic to start with, especially for adult learners who are just getting their footing.
And that is
Travel.
travel. Now, I am going to be totally honest with you and with everyone listening. When I first read that in our source stack, I rolled my eyes.
You thought it was cliche.
Incredibly cliche. I mean, of course, the very first thing every textbook teaches you is how to ask where the train station is. It feels so worn out.
It does get a bad reputation.
But as I kept reading, the sources make a really compelling structural case for why travel is not just a fun topic, but actually the ultimate linguistic training ground.
They absolutely do, and it is crucial to move past that initial eye roll and look at the actual utility of it.
Okay, wait on me.
Travel conversations are highly recommended by these institutions because they inherently involve a massive overlapping cross-section of functional everyday vocabulary.
Right, it is not just about airplanes.
No, not at all. When you talk about travel, you are inherently talking about logistics. Booking tickets, expressing preferences, choosing destinations, discussing budgets, planning time-bound activities, and navigating physical space.
It is basically a microcosm of human survival and negotiation.
Exactly.
Just packaged in a socially acceptable, fun topic.
It prepares you for the foundational realities of existing in a society. You are learning how to talk to service staff, how to ask strangers for directions, how to order food, how to handle money, and how to resolve scheduling conflicts.
Right. The stakes are low, but the vocabulary is incredibly high yield. Now, let's get very specific here, because the sources provide a really detailed, fascinating case study of what this actually looks like in practice.
The podcast example.
Yes. To demonstrate these principles, the research uses a specific beginner-friendly audio show called the Morning English Podcast as their primary example. And I actually went and listened to the audio clip the sources referenced.
And what was your immediate impression of the audio environment?
It was wild, honestly, because the production of it is so specific. The text outlines this scenario where two hosts, Mark and Emma, are discussing Emma's upcoming one-week summer vacation to Thailand.
A very standard travel topic.
Very standard. But the actual audio environment of the podcast is actively engineered to lower that effective filter we just talked about.
So?
They literally set the conversation in a private garden. You can hear birds softly chirping in the background. It feels like there's fresh sunlight coming through the audio. The atmosphere is aggressively calm, warm, and relaxing.
Which is a brilliant intentional design choice.
It really is.
They are using environmental audio cues, the birds, the quiet background, to biologically signal to the listener's nervous system that they are safe. It is an auditory warm blanket.
Exactly. And the hosts themselves, Mark and Emma, they speak in this very friendly, gentle, supportive way. Mark is calm, slightly humorous, and Emma is warm and encouraging.
They are modeling a safe social interaction.
Right. And they are discussing a very standard itinerary, going to beaches, trying local food, exploring the city. But here is where I really need to push back.
Okay, let's hear it.
And I want you to defend this because I struggled with it. I read the transcript of their dialogue that the sources provided, and it seems incredibly basic. I mean, painfully simple.
In what way?
It literally starts with Mark saying, "Good morning, Emma. How are you today?" And she says, "Good morning, Mark. I am doing great. I am actually very excited." And Mark replies, "Oh, really? Why are you excited?"
Right. The foundation of small talk.
"I am a grown adult with a mortgage, a 401k, and complex thoughts." is this really it?
I understand the frustration.
I mean, is listening to this highly simplified, almost elementary back and forth actually enough to help an adult learner make real neurological progress? Because
Yeah.
honestly, I felt a little condescended to when I first read it.
That is a very valid critique. And it is an incredibly common, almost universal reaction from adult learners who are accustomed to complex intellectual stimulation in their native language.
We want to dive right into debating philosophy or politics.
Exactly. But you have to look past the surface simplicity and examine the hidden architecture of that dialogue. The simplicity is absolutely not a bug. It is a highly intentional, meticulously engineered feature of the learning process.
Okay, I'm willing to keep an open mind. Walk me through the engineering of, "Good morning, Emma. How are you?" How is that meticulously engineered?
You have to think of it as a cognitive scaffold.
The scaffold.
Yes. When you are building a skyscraper, you do not start by hanging the custom wallpaper on the 50th floor. You start by erecting the raw steel scaffolding.
Okay, I follow you.
This simple, seemingly elementary dialogue provides a highly predictable structural framework for your brain. The sources break down the typical conversation structure of these podcasts into very specific, rigid phases.
What are the phases?
They go sequentially. Greeting, introducing the topic, asking about travel plans, discussing destinations, talking about transportation, planning activities, and then ending the conversation.
So it is a strict formula.
Precisely. And that formula is the secret.
Why?
Because the human brain only has 100% of cognitive processing power available at any given moment.
That makes sense.
If you are listening to a complex debate about the ethical implications of artificial intelligence in a foreign language, your brain is dedicating 90% of its processing power just trying to follow the logical leaps of the argument.
Right, you're trying to understand the complex social dynamics and the abstract concepts.
Exactly. And that leaves only 10% of your brain's power to actually notice the new vocabulary in grammar. And it usually results in the system crashing. You get overwhelmed and tune out.
Ah, okay, I see where you're going with this.
By moving through these predictable, culturally standard stages, two people saying hello, asking what is new, and making a plan, the listener's brain does not have to work overtime to figure out what is happening socially.
Because the social structure is universally familiar.
Exactly. The cognitive load drops to near zero for the context. This allows your brain to dedicate 100% of its processing power to how it is being said. You can dedicate all your mental energy to observing the language itself.
That completely flips my perspective. If I already know exactly how a conversation about a summer vacation is supposed to flow, I am not trying to solve a mystery.
You are not guessing what happens next.
All right, I could just focus on the actual linguistic tools they are using to get from point A to point B.
Exactly. You are drastically minimizing cognitive load. Furthermore, these podcasts intentionally use slow speech and a friendly tone.
The auditory blanket again.
Right. When Mark says, "Oh, really? Why are you excited?" he is doing something critical. He is modeling the natural rhythm of conversational turn-taking.
Bottling turn-taking.
He is actively demonstrating to the listener how to keep a conversation going, how to show polite interest, how to prompt the other person to speak without interrupting.
And that is a crucial, high-level social skill that flashcards and textbooks simply cannot teach.
They cannot teach it at all.
So we aren't just learning the words. We are learning the dance steps of the conversation.
Yes.
We are learning that when someone says they are excited about something, the socially appropriate expected English response is to ask why, using a very specific rising intonation.
No.
Like,
Oh, really? You are learning the music of curiosity.
the music of curiosity. I love that. In linguistic terms, you're learning the pragmatics of the language,
Right.
the practical, unwritten rules of social engagement.
Yes, the pragmatics are essential.
Okay, I concede the point. The simplicity is brilliant. But to really understand how this simple scaffold builds genuine fluency, we need to look under the hood.
We do.
We need to dissect the specific linguistic payloads that are hidden within this casual garden chat. Because it sounds like Mark and Emma are just passing the time, but according to the Cambridge Dictionary and Oxford Insights in our sources, they are actually delivering highly targeted information.
They are delivering a remarkably precise curriculum, heavily disguised as mundane small talk.
Let's look at the vocabulary payload first. The text highlights a specific set of essential travel words that are embedded in the dialogue. Words like destination, vacation, trip, flight, hotel, reservation, tourist, sightseeing.
Very foundational terms.
And what really struck me here was not just the list itself. I mean, anyone can look up those words. It was how the sources, specifically the Cambridge Dictionary Insights, aggressively emphasize the nuances between these words when they are actually used in context.
The context is everything.
It is. For example, if you just look at a standard translation dictionary or use an app on your phone, you might easily think the words trip and destination mean the exact same thing.
They both relate to going somewhere on vacation.
Right. But in functional English, they serve very different mechanical and conceptual purposes within a sentence.
Walk us through the difference.
The text breaks it down beautifully. It defines a destination as the specific physical place where someone is going. Like Paris is a popular travel destination. Or Thailand is my destination. It is the geographic endpoint on the map.
It is a fixed point.
Exactly. But a trip is fundamentally different. A trip is defined as the actual journey there, the time spent there, and the journey back.
The whole experience.
Right. For example, we are planning a short trip to the mountains. A destination is a static location, but a trip is an event in time.
And that subtle conceptual distinction is incredibly difficult, almost impossible to grasp if you are only memorizing isolated definitions on an app.
Because in many languages, those concepts might use the exact same root word.
Exactly. But when Emma says to Mark, I am planning a trip to Thailand, the listener hears the word trip paired with the active verb of planning an event and the word Thailand acting as the static destination.
The surrounding context completely defines the boundaries of the word.
And it is not just the nouns that work this way, it is the expressions too.
Yes. The text highlights conversational phrases that Emma uses, like, I can't wait, I'm looking forward to it. And Mark's response, that sounds amazing.
These are phrasal verbs and idioms, and they are notoriously dangerous for learners because they do not translate literally across languages.
Not at all. Take the phrase, I can't wait. If you translate that literally, word for word, into many other languages, it means I am physically or psychologically incapable of waiting.
Which sounds almost aggressive. Or impatient.
Or just rude. If I tell a baker I cannot wait, they're going to think I am demanding my bread immediately.
They would be very confused.
That's exactly. But in conversational English, it is an expression of deep, positive enthusiasm. Hearing Emma say, I can't wait, with the joyful, excited tone in that peaceful garden setting teaches the listener the emotional reality of the phrase.
Rather than the literal dictionary translation.
That is the music of the language doing the heavy lifting again.
It really is.
But I want to pivot, because here's where the research got really interesting for me. I am talking about the grammar.
Ah, the grammar.
The sources, citing Cambridge English Grammar, dive deeply into the specific grammar rules embedded in travel planning. They break down why travel inherently forces the speaker to use multiple different time tenses naturally.
It is unavoidable when talking about travel.
It is almost like the topic of travel is a grammatical Trojan horse. You think you are just talking about a beach, but you are actually doing complex chronological gymnastics.
It absolutely is a Trojan horse. Travel, by its very nature, exists across multiple planes of time.
Yes.
You have the reality of where you are right now, the solid plans you're making for the future, the general facts about how the world works, and the spontaneous decisions you make in the moment.
All in one conversation.
The text outlines 4 specific grammatical tenses that emerge effortlessly in a standard travel conversation.
Let's go through them, because reading this section was a massive light bulb moment for me. I finally understood why traditional grammar drills fail so miserably.
Let's hear it.
First, the sources list the simple present tense. They give the example, I travel every summer. Or, she loves visiting new places.
The simple present tense is used for stating general facts, universal truths, and recurring habits. It establishes the permanent baseline reality of the speaker. It is what is generally true.
Okay, simple enough. Then we have the present continuous. And the example they give is, I am planning a trip, or we are traveling next week.
This is a shift in time. This tense is used for current, ongoing actions or very firm, locked-in plans that are already in motion for the future.
And this is exactly what Emma does in the dialogue.
Right.
When Mark asks her why she is so excited this morning, she says, because I'm planning my summer vacation. She is using the present continuous to anchor a future event, the vacation, in her immediate, current reality.
She is actively experiencing the joy of the planning right now.
Yes. Seeing it used this way makes the grammar rule feel completely natural and psychologically accurate, rather than this abstract mathematical formula you have to memorize on a blackboard.
It is simply the most accurate way for her to describe her current state of mind to her friend.
Exactly. The grammar serves the emotion, not the other way around.
And then, as the conversation naturally progresses, it moves into the future tenses. And the text makes a critical distinction here between the future with going to and the future with will.
This This is a distinction that always tripped me up, and I think it confuses almost everyone.
It is very subtle.
The source says, going to is used for concrete future plans. I am going to visit Thailand. We're going to stay at a nice hotel.
Right. Going to strongly implies intention and prior planning. It signals to the listener that you, the speaker, have already made the decision long before this current conversation started. The plan is baked.
But then the future with will is used for sudden decisions, offers, or promises made at the exact moment of speaking. The example they give is, I will book the tickets tomorrow.
If you think about the flow of a real logistical conversation, this pivot happens all the time.
All the time.
You are discussing a trip with a friend, you suddenly realize a crucial detail hasn't been handled, and you make a spontaneous decision to fix it.
Let me see if I can build a hypothetical scenario to test this, because I want to make sure I really grasp the social mechanics of this grammar rule.
Go for it.
Imagine you and your spouse were in the kitchen. Your spouse opens the fridge and says, oh no, we don't have any milk for the coffee.
A tragedy.
A morning tragedy. If I reply by saying, I am going to get milk, using the plan tense, that actually changes the social dynamic, doesn't it?
It does.
Because it implies I already knew we were out of milk. I already made the plan to go to the store, but I just didn't tell them. Which honestly might start an argument. Like, if you knew we were out of milk, why didn't you just get it yesterday?
Exactly. You are communicating withholding.
But if I reply using the spontaneous tense and say, oh, I will go get some milk, it signals that I am reacting to their new information right now. I am being helpful. I am making a spontaneous offer to solve the problem.
That is a brilliant, highly accurate hypothetical.
Yes.
The grammatical tense you choose entirely dictates the social reality of the interaction.
Wow.
Using going to makes you seem secretive or previously aware. Using will makes you seem spontaneously helpful.
The subtle difference between prior intention and spontaneous decision is mapped perfectly onto these two different future tenses.
And if you use the wrong one, you don't just make a grammatical error, you make a social error.
And the beauty of this is that the learner absorbs all of that incredibly complex social dynamic just by listening to Mark and Emma figure out their logistics.
Passively absorbing the rules.
The listener does not need a whiteboard chart explaining intention versus spontaneity. They just hear the difference in how the characters react to new information. They hear Emma say, oh, the hotel is full. Okay, I will look for an Airbnb.
This is exactly why the sources are so adamant about the unparalleled power of conversational audio. A textbook strips the language of its social consequences.
It totally sterilizes it.
But a podcast provides the living ecological niche where these grammar rules actually live, breathe, and have real-world impact.
Okay, I am completely sold on the passive absorption. But this raises a massive practical question.
Which is?
Knowing the definitions is great. Hearing the grammar rules in a living context is fantastic. It is undeniably a huge step up from the flashcards in my hoarder vault.
We can agree on that.
But the sources are very, very clear on this next point. Just letting a podcast wash over you while you wash the dishes or sit in the garden is not going to get you all the way to the finish line.
No, it is not magic.
Listening alone is not enough to achieve actual spoken fluency. The listener has to eventually transition from being a passive consumer of the audio to an active physical participant.
Right. It is the difference between appreciation and execution. You cannot learn to play the piano just by listening to Mozart on repeat.
You'll just have a great Spotify playlist.
It will give you a great ear for music, sure, but eventually your fingers have to touch the keys. And this is where the rigorous research from Harvard Language Learning comes into play in our source stack.
This is where the real work begins.
They outline a very specific, almost athletic methodology for turning passive listening into active mastery.
Let's break down their techniques, because this section of the text feels like the actual step-by-step instruction manual for how to properly use a podcast as a tool.
It is a blueprint.
The first technique they recommend is listening multiple times, which sounds obvious.
Yeah.
But they make it clear that it is not just about putting the episode on repeat and zoning out while you stare out the window.
No, absolutely not. Zoning out is passive. What Harvard proposes is a highly structured, intentional process called layered listening.
Layered listening.
According to the framework detailed in the sources, you must approach the exact same piece of audio with a completely different cognitive goal each time you play it. You are peeling back the layers of the conversation.
Okay, walk me through these layers. Let's say I'm listening to Mark and Emma's Thailand episode. What am I doing on the first pass?
The first time you listen, your only goal is survival and broad comprehension.
Just survival.
You are listening for the main idea. You are explicitly not worrying about understanding every single word. If you miss a word, you do not pause, you do not rewind. You let it go.
That sounds hard to do.
You are just trying to grasp the narrative arc. Who are these people? What are they talking about? What is the general mood of the interaction?
In the Mark and Emma scenario, your goal on pass 1 is just to realize, okay, these are two friends. Emma is going on a trip to Thailand. Mark is happy for her. That is it.
Exactly. You are just getting the lay of the land. You are building the broad context so your brain has a framework to put the details into later.
I imagine this first pass can be incredibly frustrating for perfectionists who want to understand 100% immediately.
It is deeply uncomfortable for high achievers, but it is necessary to train your brain not to panic when it hears an unknown sound.
So you train out the panic. And then what?
Then you go back and listen a second time. This is the detective pass.
The detective pass.
Now that you know the ending of the story, your brain is freed up to focus specifically on the machinery. You are listening for the vocabulary. You are hunting for those key words we discussed: destination, reservation, flight.
You are paying close attention to how they fit into the sentences.
Exactly. And this is where the sources mention a very specific physical action: maintaining a vocabulary notebook.
Ah, right. But they add a crucial caveat here. You do not just write down the word flight equals avion. You hear a new word, you pause the audio, you write the word down, and crucially, you write down the entire example sentence from the podcast.
Yes, not just the dictionary definition.
Okay.
Because, as we have exhaustively established, the context is the definition. Writing down the full sentence preserves the functional environment of the word.
You are saving the habitat, not just the animal.
That is a perfect way to put it, saving the habitat.
Okay, so pass 1 is survival, pass 2 is the detective work. What is pass 3?
Then you go back and listen for a third time. And this is where the Harvard methodology gets highly technical and frankly fascinating. On the third pass, you are instructed to ignore the meaning of the words entirely.
Wait, ignore the meaning entirely.
Entirely. You pretend you do not even speak the language. On the third pass, your goal is to listen solely to notice the physical pronunciation.
Just the sounds.
You are listening to the intonation, the stress on certain syllables, the micropauses between sentences, the rhythm of the back and forth banter.
You are listening to it as pure sound, like a heartbeat or a drum track.
Exactly. You are listening to the music. You are studying the acoustics of the language.
Which brings up what I think is the most mind-bending technique mentioned in the Harvard research, a practice called shadowing.
Shadowing is incredibly powerful.
The sources say that once you have done your layered listening, you should start the audio again, and you should speak out loud at the exact same time as the audio.
Simultaneous speech.
Now, I read this, and my mind immediately went to being in the car, driving on the highway, and singing along to your absolute favorite song. You know that feeling when you know a song so intimately well that you aren't just singing the lyrics anymore?
You become the singer.
Right. You are mimicking the singer's exact intake of breath, their exact vocal inflections, the slight gravel in their voice, the exact rhythm of the chorus.
Is that what shadowing is?
It is exactly that.
But does mimicking someone's rhythm like a parrot actually change how your brain processes the language? Because part of me feels like you are just mindlessly mimicking without thinking. The singing analogy is perfectly apt. And your skepticism about mindless mimicking is common, but it misses the biological reality of speech.
Okay, explain the biology then.
Yes, shadowing fundamentally and permanently changes how the language is processed, and it does so because it physically bridges the gap between the auditory cortex and the motor cortex in your brain.
Okay, wait, slow down. How does hearing a sound connect to the motor cortex?
When you are simply listening to Mark and Emma, you are processing the language intellectually in the auditory centers of your brain. You are understanding it as data.
Right, data input.
But speaking a language is not an intellectual exercise. It is a highly complex athletic feat.
Athletic. Really?
Absolutely. It requires the precise micro-coordination of your lungs, your vocal cords, your tongue, your lips, and your jaw.
I never thought about it like that.
Every single language on Earth requires a slightly different physical posture of the vocal apparatus. French requires a different mouth shape than English. Mandarin requires different vocal cord tension than Spanish.
So it's literally physical training.
When you try to speak simultaneously with Mark or Emma, fighting to match their exact cadence, tone, and breath, you are forcing your brain to send electrical signals to your motor cortex. You are building physical muscle memory in your mouth and throat.
So you are literally training your body, not just your brain. You're doing linguistic push-ups.
Exactly. You are moving the language from theoretical intellectual knowledge to a physical involuntary reflex. You are repeatedly teaching your muscles how to produce these specific foreign sounds effortlessly.
That is mind-blowing.
The goal of shadowing is that eventually, when you are in a real conversation in a real bakery, your mouth already knows what to do before your conscious brain even gets involved.
It bypasses the vault entirely.
You are not consciously trying to remember how to position your tongue to pronounce a word. Your body just remembers the physical sensation of saying it, the same way your body remembers how to ride a bicycle.
That is incredible. It is exactly like an athlete running repetitive drills.
Yeah.
A basketball player shoots 1,000 free throws in practice, so that in the final seconds of the game, the movement is entirely automatic.
They do not think about it, they just do it.
They aren't thinking about the angle of their elbow. They just shoot. Shadowing is shooting free throws for your mouth.
Precisely. And the text suggests following up this intense physical shadowing with even more active generative exercises.
Like what?
They recommend taking the transcript of the podcast and role-playing. You grab a friend or a language partner and you actually act out the Mark and Emma dialogue. You play Mark, they play Emma.
Role-playing forces you to generate the language in real time, pulling it from your brain to your mouth, simulating the social pressure of a real conversation, but doing it in a safe, controlled environment where you are allowed to mess up.
Exactly. And then they recommend taking the final step, telling personal travel stories or planning a future dream vacation of your own.
Using the new tools.
But doing it using the specific vocabulary and the specific grammar tenses we talked about. You use the simple past tense to tell a story about a trip you took last year, and you use the going to and will tenses to plan your dream vacation to Japan.
Making it personal.
They also suggest doing fill-in-the-blank comprehension exercises. For example, I booked a blank for my vacation, and you have to actively recall the word hotel.
These activities force the learner to take the raw building blocks they observed in the podcast, the tools they practice shadowing, and finally use them to construct their own original, spontaneous sentences.
It is the final step in the acquisition pipeline, moving from observation to imitation, and finally to independent creation.
So we have gone on quite a journey here. We have gone from the cognitive scaffold of the simple, predictable dialogue to extracting the hidden payloads of grammar and vocabulary, to building actual physical muscle memory in our throats through shadowing, and finally to creating our own spontaneous sentences.
It is a complete system.
But once the mechanics of speaking are dialed in like this, the conversation naturally opens the door to what I think is the most profound and frankly beautiful aspect of language learning highlighted in our entire stack of sources today.
You are referring to the cultural integration outlined in the final section.
Yes, section 5 of the text. Because words do not exist in a vacuum. A language is not just a collection of sounds. It is a mirror of the people who speak it.
Absolutely.
The sources point out that travel conversations inevitably, inescapably, introduce cultural awareness. When Mark and Emma talk about going to Thailand, they aren't just exchanging data about flight times and hotel star ratings.
They talk about the experience.
They talk about trying local food, they discuss exploring festivals or visiting historical places.
This is a crucial philosophical point that is heavily backed by the Oxford Handbook of Language Learning in our source stack. Their extensive research asserts that language learning is intrinsically, inextricably connected to understanding culture.
You cannot separate them.
You simply cannot fully grasp a language without grasping the cultural context and the worldview in which it lives. Language is, at its core, an expression of a culture's values.
I noticed this even in the absolute simplest parts of Mark and Emma's dialogue. It is so subtle, but it's there.
Where did you see it?
When Mark and Emma discuss exploring the city and trying local Thai food, they aren't just exchanging itinerary data points, they're sharing a human experience. Emma is showing excitement for experiencing someone else's culture, and Mark is validating that excitement.
And that validation, that enthusiasm, is codified in the rules of the language itself.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of fluency, mastering an expression like, have a great trip, isn't just about wishing someone well chronologically. It is about learning the cultural etiquette of enthusiasm, support, and empathy that is deeply embedded in everyday conversational English.
Because it is not the same everywhere, right?
No. In some cultures around the world, expressing overly enthusiastic outward anticipation for a future trip might be seen as boastful, inappropriate, or even tempting fate. You might be expected to speak more modestly about your plans.
Oh, that is fascinating.
But in the English-speaking cultural context presented in this specific podcast, displaying high vocal excitement, saying things like, "I can't wait," or "That sounds amazing," is not just allowed, it is the expected, polite, social lubricant.
It is the socially correct way to bond with the other person. You are learning the emotional rules of the culture alongside the grammatical rules.
Exactly.
Think about it. When Emma says she is going to Thailand and Mark replies with, "That sounds like an amazing trip," he is emotionally validating her excitement.
He is matching her energy.
If he just looked at her and said, "Okay, noted," or "I have recorded that information," it would be grammatically perfect. There's no grammar error in, "Okay, noted."
No, grammatically it is fine.
But culturally, it is completely wrong. It would be incredibly rude, dismissive, and cold. He would sound like a sociopath.
Precisely. You are learning how to be an empathetic, participating member of that specific culture. You are learning the unwritten rules of emotional exchange.
And this is where podcasts truly shine over textbooks. Because podcasts feature real human voices with genuine human inflection, breath, and emotion. They transmit this cultural data far more effectively than flat black and white text ever could.
You hear the humanity.
You hear the warmth in Mark's voice. You hear the genuine rising excitement in Emma's tone, knowing exactly what empathy sounds like in spoken English.
It connects you to the people, not just the grammar.
That is such a powerful reframing of what it means to learn a language. It completely changes the goal. It is not just about translating a menu so you don't accidentally order something you are allergic to.
Right.
It is about learning how to connect with another human being on their own cultural terms. It is about closing the gap between two people.
It is about empathy.
So let's take a moment to look back at the incredible ground we have covered today, because we have unpacked a massive amount of cognitive science and linguistic strategy.
We really have.
We started with that terrible, paralyzing feeling of the locked vault, the hoarder brain, knowing all the rules but being utterly unable to speak when the pressure is on.
The bakery incident.
Yes, the bakery incident. And we have seen how conversational podcasts, like our peaceful garden-setting example with Mark and Emma, completely bypass the rigid, stress-inducing environment of traditional textbooks.
The auditory warm blanket.
They act as that warm blanket, lowering that effective filter, keeping our cortisol levels down, and allowing our brains to absorb the language in a relaxed, receptive state.
We explore why the seemingly cliché topic of travel is actually the perfect functional training ground.
Right, providing a predictable cognitive scaffold that frees up our brain's processing power. We dug deep into the hidden payload of grammar disguised as small talk.
Learning how the present continuous anchors future joy.
And how the subtle shift between going to and will can completely alter the social reality of a conversation, like in our missing milk scenario.
A great example.
And we unpacked the rigorous athletic strategies like the Harvard methodology of layered listening and the incredible biological hack of shadowing,
which literally connects your auditory cortex to your motor cortex,
cementing this new theoretical knowledge into actual physical involuntary muscle memory.
And finally, we saw how all of this mechanical effort ultimately serves the higher, beautiful purpose of cultural connection and human empathy.
It is a remarkable, deeply scientific progression from passive, relaxed listening to active, empathetic, physical communication. It proves that the brain is entirely capable of mastering these complex systems if we just get out of our own way and use the right tools.
It really is.
And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now, wherever you are. Whether you are actively trying to learn English for a new job, or maybe you're trying to pick up a new coding language, or master a complex new physical hobby, the underlying behavioral lesson here is universal.
The application is broad.
The key is to immerse yourself in the natural, contextual application of the skill, rather than just locking yourself in a room and memorizing the rule book in isolation. You have to get out of the dictionary of car parts, you have to get into the passenger seat and watch someone drive.
Find your Mark and Emma.
Find your podcast, whatever that looks like for your specific goal. Find your calm, supportive experts who can model the flow of the skill for you in a low-stress environment.
And then listen actively.
Do the layers. Shadow them. Mimic their rhythms, their breaths, and their intonations until the theoretical knowledge in your head becomes a physical, automatic reflex in your body.
And as we consider the profound power of these simulated recorded conversations to hack the brain's language centers so effectively, it raises a rather provocative question about where education is heading in the very near future.
Ooh, I like where this is going. What is the question we are leaving them with?
If simply listening to static, pre-recorded audio of Mark and Emma in a garden can build physical muscle memory and deep cultural empathy through techniques like shadowing and layered listening, how will our human ability to learn be transformed as we enter an era of fully interactive, AI-driven audio environments?
No, wow.
Imagine a podcast that doesn't just play for you, but actually listens to you as you shadow it. An audio environment that gently corrects your intonation in real time, that notices when your cognitive load is too high and dynamically alters its own vocabulary to reduce your stress.
That is incredible.
We are rapidly moving toward a reality where you can converse with perfectly calibrated, culturally nuanced, endlessly patient synthetic conversational partners without ever leaving your home.
If a simple static audio file can rewire your motor cortex and teach you cultural empathy, what happens to the human brain when the podcast actually talks back?
It is something to think about.
Wow. That completely changes the landscape of education entirely. The scaffolding wouldn't just be predictable. It would be endlessly personalized to your exact psychological state. The vault would never, ever lock again.
Never again.
That is a brilliant, slightly mind-bending thought to leave off on. We will let you all mull that one over on your own commutes or while you were doing the dishes.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the mechanics of the human mind and the power of conversation. As always, keep exploring, keep listening actively, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Welcome to the Morning English Podcast. Listen, learn, and speak English daily.
Welcome in, everyone. We are so incredibly thrilled to have you joining us today.
Truly thrilled. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so to kick things off, I want to ask you to vividly picture a scenario. And it is a highly specific but universally recognized situation that I can almost guarantee you found yourself in before.
Oh, probably more times than you can count.
Right. And probably quite recently, too. So you're standing in the lobby of a high-rise building. You step into an elevator, and the heavy metal doors slide shut with that definitive echoing thud.
That awful thud. It seals you in.
Exactly. It's just you and one other person. Maybe it's a neighbor you recognize from the mailroom but don't actually know, or perhaps a coworker from a completely different department who you only ever see near the coffee machine.
Right. Someone you vaguely recognize but have zero context for.
Exactly. Or, if you prefer, picture yourself waiting at a suburban bus stop on a quiet, misty Tuesday morning. A stranger walks up and takes a position exactly 4 feet away from you, waiting for the exact same bus. In both of these microenvironments, there is a moment. You know the moment. That distinct, palpable, heavy second of silence.
Oh, it's a silence that actually carries a physical weight to it, doesn't it?
It really does.
You can almost feel the air pressure change in the room.
Yes. The air feels thick. You feel this slight creeping, almost biological pressure to say something. I mean, anything at all.
Just to prove you're not a statue.
Right. You just need to acknowledge that you are both living, breathing human beings sharing the same tiny physical space. But your brain starts racing. What on earth do you say?
You certainly can't ask this stranger about their deepest existential fears.
No, definitely not. And you can't ask them about their financial situation or, their political leanings. You need something completely safe. You need something effortless. You need
The weather.
the weather.
It truly is the ultimate social lifesaver. It is the universal toolkit we all instinctively reach for when the silence gets just a little too loud and our cortisol levels start to spike from the awkwardness of unacknowledged proximity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today is to understand exactly why the weather is universally considered the ultimate form of small talk.
We aren't just going to skim the surface here.
No, we want to uncover how it acts as a crucial social bridge between people, and how, particularly if you are an English learner, mastering this seemingly simple vocabulary actually unlocks an immense, life-changing amount of confidence.
It's basically the absolute shortcut to navigating everyday life in the English-speaking world.
It really is. Now, the materials we're examining today are instructional resources designed specifically for English learners. We're talking vocabulary guides, conversational breakdowns, idioms, and even some real-world dialogue transcripts.
But we aren't here to just read you a vocabulary list.
Far from it.
Yeah. This is a brilliant topic to dive into from an analytical perspective, precisely because it's so easy to dismiss. On the surface, talking about the weather seems like the most trivial, mundane, throwaway topic imaginable.
Yeah, you might be sitting there thinking, why dedicate an entire deep dive to saying it's raining?
Exactly. But small talk about the weather is never actually about meteorology. It's about human connection. It's about evolutionary psychology. It's about signaling safety, friendliness, and a shared reality. When we look at these English learning materials, we aren't just looking at basic grammar rules. We are looking at the foundational blueprints of human social interaction.
I am absolutely fascinated by that phrase, signaling safety, because when you look at the research and the sociological data presented in our sources, it all traces back to a very primal human need.
It really does.
The text emphasizes right out of the gate that weather is a universal experience. Now, we all know that on a logical level, but when you stop and think about the sociological implications, it's incredibly powerful.
Because every single person on the planet, regardless of their cultural background, their age, their socioeconomic status, their profession, or their language proficiency,
they all experience the element.
Exactly. We all feel the sunshine. We all flinch when it's freezing cold. We all run for cover when it rains. It is the one single phenomenon happening to all of us at the exact same time.
Precisely. And that universality is the absolute key to why it functions so perfectly as a mechanism for small talk.
Because absolutely everyone is experiencing it. Absolutely no expertise is required to discuss it. I want to bring this back to that elevator scenario you painted earlier.
Okay, let's go back to the elevator.
If you try to break that heavy silence by starting a conversation with a stranger about, say, a recent sports game, you were taking a massive social gamble.
Oh, a huge gamble. I've actually done this. I once tried to break the ice with a guy in a coffee shop line by pointing at his hat and mentioning the local baseball team's terrible loss the night before.
Oh, no. How did that go?
Turns out, he didn't follow sports at all. He just liked the color of the hat.
Oh, that's brutal.
The look of utter confusion on his face, it somehow made the silence even worse than if I had just said nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You assumed a shared context that simply wasn't there. If you bring up a new critically acclaimed movie, they might not have seen it, and now you've made them feel slightly uninformed.
Right.
If you bring up politics or current events, well, we all know how rapidly that can become uncomfortable, volatile, or highly combative.
It's a minefield.
But the weather. The weather is the ultimate neutral ground. It is happening to both of you simultaneously right outside that window. Because it requires no specialized knowledge, it becomes a completely safe topic.
It avoids all sensitive or controversial subjects by its very nature.
You don't have to worry about offending someone's deeply held beliefs by observing that it is currently drizzling.
It is the great equalizer. You could be standing next to a billionaire CEO or a college student or a retired school teacher, and if it's pouring rain, you are all just humans trying not to get wet.
That's a great way to put it.
You can look at each other, shake your umbrellas, and say, terrible weather today, and instantly you have agreed on something. You have found common ground.
And that brings up a really crucial concept that the language experts in our sources explicitly define. They call it the social bridge.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of that social bridge, particularly when viewed through the lens of evolutionary psychology.
Right, because historically, when two human beings from different tribes or family groups encountered each other in a small space, silence was a threat.
Silence meant danger.
It meant the other person was observing you, potentially calculating a risk or sizing you up. So we developed verbal grooming small talk as an all-clear signal.
That is so interesting.
When you say something simple like, nice weather today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or it looks like it might rain later, you're not actually asking for a meteorological assessment.
No, you aren't asking the other person to check their phone and analyze the barometric pressure.
You are using those words as a tool. You are casting a line across that awkward, potentially threatening silence to build a bridge. You are verbally signaling, I acknowledge you, I am friendly, I am not a threat, and I am open to interaction.
It's the modern equivalent of showing your empty hands to prove you aren't holding a weapon. You are just holding an observation about the clouds.
That's exactly what it is.
These simple comments lower the social stakes. They create a comfortable baseline environment so that eventually deeper and more meaningful conversations can happen. It's like warming up before a heavy workout.
You don't just walk into a gym and try to deadlift 300 pounds cold.
You'd pull a muscle.
Yeah.
You do some light stretching first. Weather talk is the conversational stretching. It warms up the vocal cords, it establishes rhythm, and it tests the social dynamic.
And we have to acknowledge that this stretching carries immense cultural importance, which varies significantly depending on where you are in the world. Our sources make a specific, highly detailed mention of the United Kingdom.
Yes, the UK is famous for this.
Studies consistently show a massive percentage of British people regularly use the weather as their primary conversation topic when making small talk with strangers, neighbors, or coworkers. It is practically a national pastime.
But why is that? Why the UK specifically? I mean, obviously they have famously unpredictable weather, but is it just the maritime climate, or is there something deeper in the cultural DNA?
It is a perfect storm pun, entirely intended of geography and culture. Geographically, the UK sits at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, making its weather genuinely changeable and unpredictable from hour to hour.
So that provides a constant stream of new material.
Exactly. But culturally, it's about navigating high context versus low context social norms. In British culture, which historically places a very high premium on privacy, asking personal questions too quickly is considered incredibly intrusive and rude.
You don't ask a stranger what they do for a living right away.
Never. The weather provides an exquisitely polite entry point. It allows you to be sociable and friendly without crossing any boundaries of privacy. When a British person says, "Quite windy today, isn't it?" they are fulfilling a complex social contract.
For an English learner entering that culture, understanding this unwritten sociological rule is arguably just as important as knowing the vocabulary itself.
I would argue it's even more important.
That makes so much sense. If you were in a place with completely predictable weather, say Southern California in July, where it's just sunny and 75 degrees every single day.
Weather actually loses its utility as a social bridge.
Because there's nothing to observe. Still sunny, yep, conversation over. In those places, small talk often shifts to things like traffic, which is their unpredictable daily struggle.
Right, traffic becomes the new weather.
But regardless of regional variations, this brings up a fantastic point for anyone trying to master the English language.
This raises an important question. How does an English learner actually leverage this cultural quirk to their advantage?
I am so glad you asked, because the sources are adamant about this. They describe weather vocabulary as the ultimate sandbox for language learners. And I just love that metaphor.
Such a great visual.
Think about a literal sandbox. It is a defined, safe space. You can build sandcastles, you can knock them down, you can experiment, and if it all collapses, nobody gets hurt. There are no real-world consequences. Weather conversations are the low-stakes conversational sandbox.
To understand why this sandbox is so effective, we need to look briefly at the brain science of language acquisition. Linguists often talk about the affective filter hypothesis.
Okay, what is the affective filter?
Essentially, when a learner is anxious, stressed, or afraid of making a mistake, say, we're discussing a complex topic like politics, or trying to explain a technical problem at work, their affective filter goes up.
It's like a mental block.
Literally. Their brain physically blocks the absorption and fluid recall of language because it is too busy managing the stress response.
They freeze up. The cognitive load is just too heavy. You're trying to remember the vocabulary, figure out the grammar, and make sure you don't say something socially inappropriate. It's exhausting.
It's exactly. But weather. The cognitive load of weather is incredibly low. The vocabulary is foundational. Sunny, rainy, windy, cloudy, hot, cold. These are short, punchy, universally understood concepts.
And because the social stakes are non-existent, the learner's affective filter drops.
The anxiety disappears. They can actually relax and focus purely on the mechanics of forming the sentence. It provides a psychologically safe environment to practice vocalizing the language.
And you get to practice it constantly. That's the beauty of it. The sources highlight the sheer frequency of use in real life.
You hear it everywhere.
If you are learning English, you want to invest your study time in topics that give you a high return on investment. If you spend 3 hours memorizing the vocabulary for deep-sea scuba diving equipment, you might use those words once a decade.
Unless you're a marine biologist.
Right. But if you learn weather vocabulary, you will hear it and use it today, tomorrow, and the next day. You hear it on the news, in podcasts, from the cashier at the grocery store, or from your Uber driver.
This frequency phenomenon is vital for developing listening comprehension. Because the topic comes up so ubiquitously, it provides a constant, reliable, ambient stream of input.
Every time you turn on a local radio station, there's a weather report.
Every time you listen to a casual interview, the host might complain about the sudden rain. This repetitive exposure trains the learner's ear to the natural rhythm, intonation, and cadence of native speakers.
You start to subconsciously absorb how a native speaker's voice drops in exasperation when they talk about a miserable, gray day.
Or how their pitch rises in enthusiasm when the sun finally comes out. It is a continuous practice session that requires zero extra effort to access.
And when you are ready to actually open your mouth and speak, weather is the absolute perfect playground for practicing your grammar. This is the part of the source material that just blew my mind because it's such a practical, genius hack for learners.
It really is a brilliant strategy.
Weather conversations are the absolute best way to practice your verb tenses in a way that feels totally natural. You don't feel like you are sitting at a desk doing a rigid textbook drill. You just feel like you are making casual conversation. Let's break it down.
Let's do it.
Say you want to practice the present continuous tense. You just look out the window right now and say, "It's raining." That's it. Perfect grammar, instantly applied to reality.
And then when you want to practice the simple past tense, you simply reference yesterday. It rained yesterday. Or it was very hot last week. We had a terrible storm last night.
You are seamlessly practicing regular verbs, irregular verbs, and state of being verbs.
All within a context that makes absolute logical sense to the listener.
And then you can jump to the future tense. It will rain tomorrow. Or if you are looking at a weather app, the forecast says it's going to be sunny.
Or maybe you aren't totally sure, so it's a great time to practice modals. It might snow tonight, or it could get windy.
You can cycle through the entire timeline of English grammar, past, present, future, and conditional, just by talking about what the sky is doing.
Which is why this is so empowering. By mastering this frequent, simple, grammatically flexible topic, a learner can navigate daily English life with significantly less anxiety.
It takes the panic right out of the daily routine.
When someone in the break room says, "How about this heat?" the learner won't experience that deer in the headlights panic. They will have an arsenal of simple, well-practiced responses ready to go.
They will know that they can say, "Yes, it was so hot yesterday too."
And they will know their past tense structure is flawless. Mastering the small talk sandbox gives you the conversational momentum and the self-esteem to tackle much more complex interactions as the day goes on.
But of course, to play in the sandbox, we need the sand. We need the raw materials. Let's dive deep into the actual language itself, the lexicon of weather.
The building blocks.
The source text outlines the basic vocabulary in a highly structured way. But rather than just listing words, it highlights a specific linguistic mechanic that I found incredibly satisfying. It's a simple rule, but it is so deeply embedded in English that native speakers don't even realize they're doing it.
Ah, yes. The T suffix rule.
Yes, it's so elegant.
This brings us to English morphology, which is just a fancy linguistic term for how words change their shape to change their meaning or function. English can be notoriously chaotic with its rules.
Very chaotic.
But the inca suffix rule for weather is an incredibly elegant, predictable feature. The text points out that weather descriptions very frequently take a base noun and simply attach a p-way to the end to create the corresponding adjective.
It's like a linguistic magic trick. You take a noun, the physical thing itself, and you just attach that I sound to the end, and suddenly it becomes a description of the state of the world.
You take the word sun, you add a y, and you get sunny. The atmospheric experience of that star is light.
You take a cloud, add a y, and it's cloudy. Wind becomes windy, fog becomes foggy, rain becomes rainy, snow becomes snowy.
For a learner, finding a reliable pattern in English is like finding an oasis in a desert. Once you know the foundational noun, you automatically possess the adjective.
That predictability is rare, which makes it highly valuable. But the instructional materials we are analyzing don't just stop at those basic E adjectives. They push the learner to understand the nuances of how we describe these conditions.
Particularly when it comes to precipitation.
Yes, this is where a learner starts moving from basic functional proficiency to sounding truly natural and fluent. For example, the text draws a very deliberate, clear distinction between different intensities of rain.
Because let's be honest, rain is rarely just rain.
The text contrasts the phrase "it's drizzling" with "it's pouring." And this isn't just a vocabulary drill, this is a crucial real-world distinction.
It changes everything about how you plan your day.
If a coworker looks out the window and tells you it's drizzling, that specifically means light, misty rain. It informs your next action. You might not even need an umbrella. You can just pull your jacket hood up and make a quick dash to your car.
But if they say it's pouring, or as the text also phrases it, it's raining heavily, that paints a totally different operational picture.
You are going to get soaked to the bone. You need the heavy umbrella, the rain boots, the coat. Learning these highly specific verbs, drizzle versus pour, adds vital color and accuracy to everyday speech.
We see that exact same desire for descriptive color when the text discusses temperature. The sources make a deeply fabricating point here about human nature.
Oh, I love this part.
While you can use exact numbers, the text gives the examples the temperature is 20 degrees or it's about 5 degrees. Casual conversations rarely, if ever, stick to those numerical facts.
Numbers are clinical. They belong in a meteorological report or on a smartphone app.
Exactly. In human conversation, people crave extremes. They crave drama.
We really do. Nobody wants to just say, it is cold. That's so boring. It doesn't convey any emotion. We want to emphasize our suffering or our absolute joy.
We want to connect over the shared extreme experience.
And the text provides these fantastic, dramatic phrases that native speakers use constantly. Instead of just saying it's very cold, people will shiver and say it's freezing.
No, it might be 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside. It is not literally at the freezing point of water.
But we use the extreme word to express our subjective experience of extreme discomfort. Or instead of saying it's hot, we say it's boiling hot.
Again, your blood is not literally boiling. At least I hope not.
Let's hope not. But the hyperbole conveys the intensity of the heat. And then there is it's below zero, which carries this heavy psychological weight of absolute, bitter, unforgiving cold.
Using these slightly exaggerated extreme phrases makes a learner sound exponentially more fluent and expressive.
It really does. It shows personality.
This dramatic expression ties directly into how we emotionally categorize the weather, and how that categorization dictates the direction of the small talk.
The sources note a very clear linguistic division between positive and negative associations in the weather lexicon.
When discussing sunny weather, the language provided is inherently uplifting and expansive. The text highlights expressions like, it's a beautiful sunny day, the sun is shining brightly, or it's warm and pleasant.
These descriptions naturally generate positive conversational momentum.
Exactly. Sunshine breeds optimism in small talk. The text gives a great example response to a sunny observation. Perfect weather for a picnic.
People literally smile when they talk about the sun. The body language opens up.
But when the weather turns bad, the language becomes much more defensive, contracted, and bracing.
If it's windy, the text gives the example, hold your hat. It's very windy outside. It's an action-oriented, slightly chaotic phrase.
Or with snow, the focus is immediately on the harsh reality. It's freezing, or the ground is covered with snow.
The specific vocabulary you choose to deploy instantly sets the emotional tone of the interaction. Are we collectively celebrating the sunshine, or are we mutually commiserating about the miserable cold?
And as sociologists will tell you, shared commiseration is an incredibly powerful bonding tool.
Complaining about a shared external hardship, like a terrible storm, unites people very quickly.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of how we initiate and navigate these conversations. Knowing the vocabulary in isolation is one thing, but knowing how to smoothly deploy it in a real-time, face-to-face interaction is another entirely.
The source text is highly practical here, outlining the most common initiating questions.
Yes, the openers, the keys to unlocking the social bridge.
The text gives us the absolute classics, the ones you should have memorized and ready to fire off at any moment. How's the weather today? And what's the weather like?
These are your bread and butter. You can ask these to the barista, the bus driver, your boss, anyone.
Or if you want to be a bit more observant, you can ask yes or no questions based on what you are physically experiencing. Is it raining outside, or is it hot today?
And my absolute personal favorite for keeping a conversation flowing is, do you think it will rain later?
I love that one because it asks for a prediction, an opinion, not just a static fact. It invites the other person to look at the sky, consider their own app's forecast, and talk a little bit more.
However, navigating these openers is also where language learners face some of their most significant and sometimes comical challenges. The text explicitly points out several common traps that English learners fall into when trying to participate in this specific brand of small talk.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the most common trap, and honestly the most endearing one mentioned in the sources, is the trap of being entirely too formal.
And when you think about it, it makes total logical sense why a learner would make this mistake.
You are studying hard, you are reading textbooks, you are memorizing sophisticated multi-syllable vocabulary words, and you naturally want to use them. You want to sound educated, precise, and fluent.
So instead of using the simple, culturally accepted small talk phrases, a learner might confidently walk up to someone and say something like, and this is the direct, hilarious example from the text, The meteorological conditions are pleasant today.
Or the equally jarring, the atmospheric conditions appear unstable.
I just love imagining someone saying that.
Picture standing at that bus stop we talked about earlier. The stranger steps up, looks you dead in the eye, and says, "Excuse me, neighbor, but the atmospheric conditions appear unstable."
It sounds like you are a robot or a scientist reading a digital readout on the bridge of a spaceship.
Grammatically, it is flawless.
Right.
Vocabulary-wise, it shows a very advanced level of English. But in a social setting, it completely fails the fundamental purpose of small talk.
It fails because, as we established, small talk is about signaling intimacy, safety, and relatability, not academic precision.
When you use overly formal clinical language like meteorological conditions, you are accidentally creating an intellectual distance between yourself and the listener.
You are making the interaction heavier, colder, and more complex than it needs to be. The text playfully but firmly contrasts this with what native speakers actually say in the real world.
Instead of the robotic, the meteorological conditions are pleasant today, a native speaker simply smiles and says, "It's a nice day today."
Instead of the academic, the atmospheric conditions appear unstable, they squint at the clouds and say, "Looks like rain."
The ultimate goal here is brevity, warmth, and casual ease. Keep it simple, keep it casual, don't overthink it.
Now, besides the formality trap, there's a very specific, highly technical grammatical pitfall the text highlights. And this is a mistake almost every single learner makes at some point.
Why? Because logically, the mistake makes more sense than the actual English rule. It is what the text categorizes as mistake 1, using the phrase, "the weather is."
This is a crucial grammatical nuance to understand. A learner, often translating directly from the syntax of their native language, will frequently say, "The weather is sunny."
Or even more directly translated, they might say, "It is rain," missing the adjective form entirely.
But let's focus on "the weather is sunny." While it is perfectly understandable and gets the point across, it sounds inherently unnatural and clunky to a native English ear. The correct natural phrasing relies on a linguistic concept known as a dummy pronoun.
A dummy pronoun. That sounds like an insult to the word.
It does, but it serves a vital structural purpose. Languages like Spanish or Italian are what linguists call pro-drop languages. If it's rainy in Spanish, you can just say llueve, just the verb. The subject is implied.
But English is a rigidly subject-verb-object language. A sentence must have a subject even when nature doesn't provide one.
Who is doing the raining? The sky, the clouds, the universe.
English solves this problem by inserting a meaningless placeholder subject, the dummy pronoun it.
So the text explicitly states the rule. English almost exclusively uses "it is" when describing current weather conditions. You don't say the weather is sunny, you simply say it is sunny. You don't say the weather is rainy, you say it is rainy.
The word it is doing so much heavy lifting there, it means nothing and everything all at once. You just have to trust the it is hot, it is cold, it is snowing.
And the text gives another huge, highly practical tip for sounding natural, which builds right on top of this. It is rule. To sound truly authentic, to really nail the rhythm of English, you need to use contractions.
Absolutely. The text instructs learners to actively avoid enunciating. It is raining with clear, separated syllables.
Let's demonstrate the difference. If you say, "It is rain, ing," it sounds stilted and robotic. The phonetic rhythm is too sharp.
Instead, use the contraction, "It's raining, it's sunny, it's cold."
Combining those words smoothly mimics the natural rolling rhythm and speed of native speech. Furthermore, the text encourages the use of short, almost fragmented phrases in casual settings.
You don't always need a full, perfectly structured subject-verb-object sentence to communicate effectively.
As the text examples show, you can just gesture to the sky and say, "Nice day," or "Pretty cold today," or "Looks like rain."
Dropping the formal sentence structure entirely, ironically, is the ultimate sign of conversational fluency and comfort.
It shows you are relaxed in the language. You aren't trying too hard to prove you know the grammar. You are just sharing a human observation.
Okay, I am so incredibly excited to move into the next phase of our deep dive because we are finally leaving the literal atmospheric weather behind and entering the wild, fascinating world of metaphor.
The text notes that English possesses a massive volume of idioms directly related to weather.
And this proves just how deeply weather is ingrained in the cultural psyche of English speakers. We don't just talk about the weather to break the ice, we use the weather to describe our physical health, our emotional states, and our entire worldview.
Idioms are essentially the cultural shorthand of a language. They are fixed phrases where the literal meaning of the individual words does absolutely not match the figurative meaning of the phrase as a whole.
And because the experience of weather is universal, it provides the perfect, universally understood imagery for explaining highly complex, abstract human situations.
The text provides 4 specific, highly common weather idioms for us to analyze. Let's break down the literal imagery versus the historical metaphor of each one.
Let's do it. First up, the absolute undeniable classic of English idioms. It's raining cats and dogs.
Oh, yes.
Now, the literal meaning of this is absolutely terrifying. You picture literal felines and canines plummeting from the sky.
But the meaning provided in the text is simply heavy rain. So if you look out the window and it is an absolute downpour, you turn to your friend and say, wow, it's raining cats and dogs outside.
It's just a fun, quirky way to describe a massive storm. But where on earth did that come from?
The etymology of raining cats and dogs is heavily debated by linguists, which makes it fascinating. Some believe it comes from the Greek word katadoub, which means waterfall. Over time, katadoub morphed into cats and dogs.
That's a bit of a stretch, but okay.
Others point to Norse mythology, where dogs and wolves were associated with Odin, the god of storms, and cats were associated with witches who supposedly rode the wind.
But there's a more grounded theory, isn't there?
Yes. The most grounded, albeit slightly grim, theory relates to 17th century London. The streets had terrible drainage. During torrential downpours, the streets would flood so severely that the bodies of stray cats and dogs would wash down the streets, making it look as though it had literally rained animals. Jonathan Swift even wrote a famous poem about it in 1710.
Wow! That is incredibly grim, but it makes so much historical sense. You go from 17th century street floods to a cute phrase we use today.
Language is wild.
It really is. The second idiom shifts the focus from the external world to our internal physical state. The phrase is under the weather.
The text defines its meaning very simply as feeling sick. The example sentence is, I'm feeling under the weather today.
What's fascinating here is how our physical well-being is inextricably linguistically linked to weather terminology.
The imagery suggests that the harsh, oppressive elements of the weather have physically pressed down upon you, making you feel unwell.
The origin of this one is nautical, right?
Exactly. In the days of sailing ships, if a sailor was feeling seasick or ill, they would be sent below deck, quite literally under the weather, to protect them from the harsh winds and storms above.
Today, it serves as a very gentle, polite, socially acceptable way to say you are ill without having to give your coworkers graphic, uncomfortable details about your symptoms.
Right, you don't walk into the office and say, I have a terrible stomach ache and a fever and I was up all night. You just quietly say, I'm feeling a bit under the weather today.
And everyone instantly understands you need some space and some rest. Okay, the third idiom is much more philosophical and probably my favorite. Every cloud has a silver lining.
The text defines the meaning as, every bad situation has something positive. The example given is, don't worry about losing that job. Every cloud has a silver lining.
This is a profound metaphor for human optimism. The imagery is beautifully stark. You picture a dark, ominous gray cloud blocking the sun, representing the bad situation, the grief, or the failure.
But around the very edges of that dark cloud, you can physically see the brilliant light of the sun shining through from behind, creating a bright, silver glowing edge, the silver lining.
It implies that the darkness is temporary and the light is still there. Its origins actually trace back to John Milton's 1634 poem Comus, where he talks about a sable cloud turning forth her silver lining on the night.
That is just gorgeous. From a 1600s poem straight into modern daily conversation.
And the final idiom the text provides is head in the clouds. The meaning given is not paying attention or being unrealistic. The example is, he always has his head in the clouds.
If you imagine someone whose physical head is literally miles up in the atmosphere, inside a cloud, they can't possibly see what is happening on the solid ground right in front of their feet.
They are totally disconnected from reality, daydreaming, or distracted by fantasy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, why are idioms like these so vitally important for an English learner? Why does an instructional text include complex 17th century nautical metaphors in a basic lesson about small talk?
Because mastering these idioms allows a learner to fundamentally level up their conversational ability. You move beyond just literal observational weather tracking. It is raining, it is sunny, into the realm of expressing complex emotions, offering deep comfort, and describing abstract situations.
When you can look at a friend who just had a terrible, heartbreaking day and tell them, I know it's hard, but every cloud has a silver lining, you aren't just making small talk anymore. You're providing real emotional support, using the deeply ingrained cultural shorthand of the English language. You are truly connecting on a human level.
That connection is the ultimate goal of language learning, isn't it? And that brings us to the final and arguably most practical phase of our deep dive.
The real-world simulations.
The source text doesn't just leave us with the theory, the grammar, and the idioms. It walks us through specific conversational case studies to demonstrate exactly how this social bridge works in practice, complete with the microdynamics of human interaction.
Let's really analyze these interactions phase by phase and look at what is happening beneath the surface. Let's examine conversation 1 from the text. At a bus stop, we have person A and person B, who we can assume are strangers.
Person A initiates. Cold morning today, isn't it? Person B replies, yes, it's freezing.
Person A then says, I think it might snow later, and person B finishes with, that would be nice.
It is incredibly brief, but structurally, there is so much happening here. Person A casts the social line with what we call a tag question, isn't it? A tag question practically begs for agreement. It makes it very easy for the other person to respond.
Person B accepts the invitation and immediately escalates the emotion, using one of those extreme dramatic words we discussed earlier, freezing. This is mutual commiseration. They're instantly bonding over the shared physical discomfort of being cold.
And notice how they pivot. Once the baseline of agreement is established, person A pivots from observing the present to forecasting the future, might snow. And person B concludes with a positive shared sentiment, that would be nice.
What if person B had just grunted or just said, yeah? The bridge would have failed. But because they played the game, in just 4 short sentences, 2 complete strangers standing in the cold have established a friendly, shared reality. They are no longer threats to each other. They are allies against the cold.
Precisely. Now let's contrast those microdynamics with conversation 2. At the office.
Person A, beautiful weather today. Person B, yes, perfect for going outside. Person A, maybe you should go for lunch outside. Person B, great idea.
Notice the distinct shift in utility here. In the bus stop scenario, the conversation was purely for establishing social safety and bonding. In the office scenario, the weather observation is weaponized in a polite way to suggest a specific action.
The positive weather observation, beautiful weather today, creates a psychologically positive opening for a proposal. Maybe we could go for lunch outside. The weather serves as a polite, low-pressure pretext for an invitation.
It is so smooth. You don't just walk up to a coworker's desk out of nowhere and abruptly command, eat lunch with me. That's aggressive.
Right.
You let the beautiful weather do the asking for you. It softens the invitation.
And then there is conversation 3, talking with a neighbor. Person A, looks like rain today. Person B, yes, the sky is very dark. Person A, I hope it stops before evening. Person B, me too.
This one is entirely about shared hopes and maintaining neighborhood harmony. They observe the negative atmospheric signs together. The sky is very dark, but then they look forward to a better outcome. Hope it stops.
When person B says me too, it is a tiny, validating moment of solidarity with the person living next door to you. It maintains the peace.
These 3 distinct scenarios perfectly illustrate the incredible versatility of weather talk. It neutralizes the threat of strangers, it smoothly facilitates invitations among colleagues, and it maintains peaceful harmony with neighbors.
But our source material actually provides one final extended meta example that perfectly encapsulates everything we've analyzed today.
Oh, this is the best part. Our sources include a transcript and a detailed audio description from a show called The Morning English Podcast, hosted by 2 people named Mark and Emma. And what's brilliant is how the text sets the scene for their dialogue.
The hosts, Mark and Emma, are recording outside in a private garden. The birds are softly chirping, there's fresh sunlight falling around them, and the atmosphere is explicitly described as calm, warm, and relaxing.
It is designed to be this incredibly calming, low-anxiety environment for the listener, the ultimate low-stakes sandbox.
It is a masterclass in lowering that affective filter we discussed earlier. Emma asks the classic textbook opening question. So, Mark, how's the weather today?
Mark replies with a flawless present tense description that utilizes the tonus suffix rule we learned. It's sunny and warm. Perfect morning.
Then Emma immediately shifts the grammatical gears to the past tense to create contrast and keep the conversation moving. That sounds great. But yesterday it was raining all day. Mark agrees, noting how fast the weather changes.
What I love about this dialogue is how it models expressing personal preferences while maintaining harmony. Emma asks, do you prefer sunny or rainy weather? Mark responds, I prefer sunny weather. It makes me feel more energetic.
And here's the crucial part for social bonding. Emma validates his feeling instantly with, same here. Sunshine always improves my mood.
That phrase, same here, is the linguistic glue of the social bridge.
This entire extended dialogue from Mark and Emma is a perfect encapsulation of the deep dive. It uses the simple openers, it naturally cycles through past and present tenses, it completely avoids the overly formal meteorological language, and it creates a genuinely friendly, relatable interaction.
It shows the learner not just what words to say, but exactly what a successful, natural, warm English conversation feels like.
So what does this all mean? We have gone on an incredible journey today.
We really have. We've explored the evolutionary psychology of the elevator silence, the grammar of dummy pronouns, the grim 17th century origins of raining cats and dogs, and the microdynamics of bus stop negotiations.
Let's bring it all together. The ultimate takeaway from our deep dive today and from these incredibly rich source materials we've analyzed is that talking about the weather is never, ever really about the weather.
It is a profound, universal tool for human connection. It is a completely safe, low-anxiety space for you as an English learner to practice your pronunciation, test your verb tenses, and build your confidence.
It is the absolute simplest, most effective, and most historically proven way to break the ice in literally any situation.
And that is the absolute most important thing for you to remember as you go about your day. Memorizing these simple phrases, mastering the elegant simplicity of the high C suffix, trusting your it is dummy pronouns, and deliberately avoiding a trap of sounding like an academic meteorologist, these are not just rote vocabulary drills.
They are massive practical steps toward becoming a genuinely confident, fluent English speaker. By embracing this seemingly mundane topic, you are learning how to actively turn awkward silences into opportunities for human connection. You are mastering the unwritten social rules of the English-speaking world.
You are building social bridges, and it truly doesn't matter if it's raining cats and dogs outside, or if you are boiling hot or absolutely freezing cold. You now have the linguistic tools and the sociological understanding to handle it with grace.
Before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to ponder. We all check the weather forecast.
Every single morning, we look at our phones to see if it's going to rain or what the exact temperature will be.
But tomorrow morning, when you check that forecast, I want you to consider this. You aren't just looking up what jacket to wear or whether you need to bring an umbrella to the office.
You are actually looking up your conversational opening lines for the rest of the day. You are gathering the raw, essential materials for your social interactions.
Every passing dark cloud, every sudden cool breeze, every brilliant ray of sunshine is a fresh opportunity to cast a line and build a new connection.
I absolutely love that perspective. The forecast is literally your script for the day. So the only question left is, what social bridges will the weather help you build today? Go out there, observe the sky, and start a conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.
Welcome to the Morning English Podcast. Listen, learn, and speak English daily.
You know, usually when we talk about learning a new language or even just mastering our own native tongue, there's this underlying expectation of precision.
Right. Like there's a right and wrong way to do it.
Exactly. We treat it a bit like engineering or even like a medical diagnosis. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is. That's the problem.
It's very binary. It's structural. I mean, you want the noun, the verb, the object, and you just want them to behave predictably.
Yeah, broken or not broken, it's clean. You memorize the vocabulary, you learn the grammar rules, and you just, plug the words into the formula.
But then you step into the world of actual, real-life human interaction.
Oh, yeah.
You leave the textbook behind, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely shattered.
Right.
We are looking at a communicative landscape that is honestly incredibly murky.
It really is.
It's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters, because you aren't just translating words or conveying raw data anymore. You're translating culture.
Right, and you're managing expectations.
Exactly. And perhaps most volatile of all, you're navigating very, very fragile human egos.
Which perfectly sets up what we are getting into today. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are looking at a stack of sources that tackles what might actually be the single most dangerous, friction-filled, two-letter word in the entire English language.
It's a small word, but it packs a punch.
It really does. We're diving deep into the psychology, the sociology, and the hidden linguistic architecture of the word no.
It is a remarkably complex negotiation for such a tiny utterance.
I mean, our mission for this deep dive is to explore why this simple word causes so much visceral anxiety. And we really want to decode the specific formulas, the phrases, and the completely unspoken rules that English speakers use to set boundaries without burning bridges.
Because, anyone can memorize the vocabulary list.
Sure.
But mastering the subtle art of refusal, understanding the psychological hacks required to turn someone down while making them feel respected, that is the true mark of communication mastery.
The stakes here are surprisingly high, too.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about sounding polite for the sake of, a social script. It's about maintaining respect.
Yeah.
It's about keeping your relationships positive and functional. We're navigating the cultural expectations of environments where a direct, unvarnished refusal is very often perceived not just as a statement of fact, but as a deeply personal offense.
Which brings us to this massive cultural shock that underpins all of this. In many cultures around the world, a direct no is completely normal.
Totally standard.
Right. It is expected. It's the baseline of communication. Someone asks, do you want to go to the dinner party? And you simply say no.
And everyone just moves on with their day.
Yes. There is no resentment. There's no lingering awkwardness.
Yeah, and many linguistic frameworks think of Russian or Dutch communication styles. For example, efficiency and absolute clarity are elevated as the highest virtues.
Okay, that makes sense.
A direct no is simply the transmission of accurate data. You asked a question about my availability or my desire, and I gave you the factual answer.
But in heavily English-speaking environments, whether that's North America, the UK, or even international business settings that adopt English norms, that same blunt no lands completely differently.
Oh, it's jarring. It sounds excessively harsh. It sounds abrupt.
Yeah, in professional and social settings, it can even register as actively hostile.
I'm struggling with this a bit, though. If we're prioritizing all this harmony and softening everything, aren't we just encouraging people to be fake?
That's a really common critique.
As I was reading through this research, part of me was thinking, wait, isn't being direct just being honest? Why do we equate a simple, honest no with being rude or impatient?
I get that.
Shouldn't honesty be the ultimate sign of respect?
That is a very common frustration, and it is a completely valid, logical argument. I mean, if we define honesty purely as the transfer of factual information, then yes, no is the most honest answer.
Right.
But you have to understand the specific linguistic and cultural framework at play here. In this context, directness isn't viewed as honesty. Directness is interpreted as a lack of effort. Wait, a lack of effort? That is a completely different paradigm.
Think about the mechanics of human interaction. Bluntness takes zero social energy. To just say no is incredibly easy.
Sure, it's just one syllable.
But taking the time to craft a softer response, to thoughtfully add cushioning words, to explain your refusal gently, that requires cognitive and emotional effort.
Oh, I see.
So in these cultures, taking the time to soften the blow is the metric by which kindness and respect are measured.
Wow.
By putting in that extra effort, you are implicitly telling the other person, you are important enough to me that I'm going to carefully construct this sentence so I don't hurt your feelings.
That completely flips the script. It's not about hiding the truth or being deceitful at all. It's about doing the interpersonal work to deliver the truth safely.
Exactly. When you just drop a hard no, the other person's brain doesn't just process the fact that you can't attend their party.
What do they process?
Their brain processes the subtext. It hears, you aren't worth the extra 5 seconds it takes to be polite.
I was actually trying to visualize what that feels like in a conversation, and the best analogy I could come up with is driving a car.
Okay, I like where this is going.
A direct no in English is like slamming on the brakes in a car without wearing a seatbelt.
Oh, the kinetic energy of that is a great way to picture it.
Right. I mean, yes, technically the car stops. The function of braking was achieved. You didn't want to go to the party, and you successfully stopped the forward motion of that social plan.
But there's damage.
Exactly. Without the seatbelt, without the softening language, the sudden stop is incredibly jarring. You get thrown forward against the dashboard, and it leaves a psychological mark.
Someone is walking away from that interaction with conversational whiplash.
That's it, conversational whiplash.
That's incredibly accurate. The softening phrases act as the tension in the seatbelt. They absorb the kinetic energy of the rejection so the person you're talking to doesn't get bruised.
Okay, so if slamming on the brakes with a blunt no is completely off the table because it causes whiplash, how do we actually build this seatbelt?
It takes structure.
Because it's not enough to just tell people to be nicer. When you actually analyze the data of how native speakers gracefully decline things, there is a highly specific hidden architecture to it.
There really is. It's remarkably formulaic when you strip it down to its studs.
Yeah.
We often think of conversation as this organic, free-flowing thing. But successful polite refusals almost always follow a precise structural anatomy. It usually involves 4 distinct phases.
Acting as a sort of social pressure valve.
Yes.
I was thinking about how we actually do this in practice, and it feels less like building a sentence and more like, well, like diffusing a social bomb.
I like that. The stakes certainly feel that high when you're terrified of offending a friend or a boss.
Right. Because if you cut the wrong wire, the relationship blows up. So let's look at how you diffuse the bomb. Phase 1 is acknowledging the wire. This is appreciation or gratitude. Phase 2 is cooling the system, the apology or softener. Phase 3 is actually cutting the wire, the refusal itself.
The scary part.
Exactly. And phase 4 is stabilizing the aftermath, offering an alternative or a positive ending.
The 4 pillars of a polite boundary. Let's run a real-world scenario through this diffusal process to see how these psychological pieces interlock.
Let's do it. So a colleague invites you to an after-work event that you desperately do not want to attend and you simply cannot go.
Okay?
Phase 1, acknowledging the wire. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Stop right there and look at what phase 1 achieves on a neurological level. It immediately validates the person asking.
Before you even say no.
Exactly. Before any disappointment is introduced, before their brain can trigger a defensive response, you are rewarding their effort to connect with you. You are saying, I see you and I value the invitation.
Which completely lowers their guard.
Yeah.
Then we move to phase 2, cooling the system, but I'm so sorry.
This lowers the emotional temperature of the room. It acts as a transitional pivot.
Right?
It prepares the listener's brain for the fact that a refusal is coming, but it frames that refusal with empathy rather than hostility.
Then phase 3, actually cutting the wire.
I can't make it tonight.
This is the boundary. It is clear, it is undeniable, and it achieves the ultimate goal of the interaction.
But it doesn't sting as much.
No, look at how insulated it is. Because it was preceded by gratitude and an apology, the word can't loses its sharpest edges.
And finally, phase 4, stabilizing the aftermath. Maybe we can grab coffee next week.
Which leaves the door open for future connection. It reassures the person that the refusal is strictly about this specific event at this specific time.
It's a logistical rejection, not a rejection of them as a human being.
Exactly.
So the whole thing is, thank you so much for inviting me, but I'm so sorry I can't make it tonight. Maybe we can grab coffee next week.
It flows so smoothly you almost forget you just got rejected.
It's completely digestible.
It's like a linguistic sandwich. You have the warm, soft bread of gratitude and future plans on the outside, hiding the tough meat of the no in the middle.
What is truly fascinating here is how automatic this bomb diffusal structure becomes for people who are deeply embedded in this cultural communication style.
Oh, they don't even think about it.
Right. They don't consciously think, okay, executing phase 2, cooling the system, it becomes an ingrained rhythm.
But if you're learning it, you have to break it down.
Yes. When you break it down into this 4-part anatomy, it becomes a replicable psychological tool that anyone can use to protect their time without feeling guilty.
But here's the catch. While this 4-step diffusal is the baseline, you can't just use the exact same script every single time. Context is king here.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to tailor your vocabulary depending on who you're talking to. I like to think of it as a linguistic wardrobe. You wouldn't wear a tuxedo to the beach, and you wouldn't use the same softening words with your best friend that you use with your CEO.
The nuance required is quite granular, and applying the wrong level of formality can be just as jarring as a blunt no. Yes, we generally navigate 3 distinct contexts that require entirely different linguistic wardrobes. We have social invitations, requests for personal favors, and professional workplace demands.
Let's look at the different wardrobes for each. For social invitations, a party, a dinner, hanging out, the research suggests phrases like, "That sounds like so much fun, but I'm completely booked today."
Notice how casual that is.
Yeah.
It validates the specific nature of the event, sounds like fun, but it provides a firm boundary, completely booked. It keeps the energy light.
But then if someone asks for a favor, the stakes change. Say a friend needs help moving a couch or picking them up from the airport.
You definitely don't want to use the social wardrobe there.
Right. You do not say, that sounds like fun, but I'm booked. The vocabulary has to shift to something like, I really wish I could help, but I'm traveling this weekend.
Notice the shift from, that sounds like fun, to, I really wish I could. This is a critical psychological pivot.
Why is that so important?
When someone asks for a burdensome favor, saying, that sounds fun, would be wildly inappropriate. It's slightly mocking, honestly.
Yeah, nobody thinks moving a couch is fun.
Exactly. I wish I could is perfect for favors because it signals a genuine desire to be of service. It communicates that your desire to help is blocked purely by external circumstances beyond your control.
My heart says yes, but my physical reality says no.
Precisely. You are protecting the foundation of the friendship.
Now, contrast that with the workplace. If your boss or a client asks you to take on another project, you absolutely do not say, I wish I could help, or that sounds fun.
No, that would be a misstep.
The professional examples lean heavily on different words. I'm afraid I can't take on another task right now, or unfortunately, my bandwidth is completely full.
This is a crucial distinction. Words like unfortunately and I'm afraid are the linguistic suit and tie of the professional world.
The suit and tie, I love that.
They signal formality. They maintain a respectful, sterile distance. In a professional setting, you are establishing a boundary based on resources, bandwidth, and company priorities, not on your emotional desire to be a good friend.
Right. If you wear a comfortable sweater to a board meeting or a tailored suit to help a friend move a couch, it creates a massive, awkward dissonance.
That's a great way to put it.
Using the wrong softening phrase does the exact same thing to a conversation. If you tell your boss, I wish I could do that spreadsheet, but I'm busy, it sounds way too intimate.
And if you tell your friend, unfortunately, my bandwidth is full to help you move, you sound like a corporate robot.
Exactly. You have to read the room before you dress your refusal.
Precisely.
I want to run a specific scenario by you, though, because this is the one that always trips people up.
Okay, let's hear it.
What if a friend makes a suggestion? Let's say they want to go watch a movie on a Tuesday night, but you just don't want to go. You don't have a schedule conflict, you're not traveling, you aren't working late, you're just, well, tired.
Oh, yeah.
My instinct in that moment is to lie, to invent a conflict so I don't hurt their feelings. How do you refuse that without sounding like you just don't enjoy their company?
That is the classic dilemma. You want to maintain the integrity of the relationship, but you also don't want to exhaust yourself or lie. The most elegant solution here relies on internalizing the boundary.
Internalizing the boundary, what does that actually mean?
The ideal response is something like, that sounds like a great idea, but I am just so tired today.
That sounds great, but I'm tired. It's so simple, almost too simple.
It is simple, but highly effective, because it performs a very specific psychological trick. Let's break it down.
Okay.
That sounds great. Validates their offering. You aren't saying the movie is a bad idea or that their suggestion is boring. You are affirming their taste and their desire to hang out.
Right, so they feel good about asking.
Then, but I'm tired today, provides a gentle, intensely personal boundary.
You make the refusal about your internal state, not about their external offering.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It is impossible for a friend to argue with you being tired. If you say you're busy, they might try to reschedule for later that evening.
Or ask what you're busy with.
Right. If you say you don't like the movie, they'll just suggest another one. But I'm exhausted is an unassailable biological fact. It doesn't make them feel rejected because the no has absolutely nothing to do with them.
You're rejecting the activity, not the person. And actually, by owning your fatigue, you are being quite vulnerable, which ironically strengthens the friendship even while you were saying no.
Yes, it does.
You're trusting them enough to admit you're running on empty.
It builds intimacy through honesty
Yeah.
rather than destroying it through rejection.
Okay, so knowing the right phrases, the suit and tie words, the comfortable sweater words, the internal boundaries, that's half the battle. But there are traps.
Oh, there are always traps.
Hidden communication traps that I think we all fall into, even when we know the rules.
The pitfalls are everywhere, and they largely stem from the intense discomfort we feel when we assert our own needs.
Let's talk about the panic response. Because there's this trap, and I am incredibly guilty of this, which is the trap of over-explaining.
We all do it.
Think about the last time you, the listener, right now, wanted to decline a coffee date or a meeting. You probably didn't just use the four-step refusal.
Probably not.
You probably drafted a text message or launched into a monologue that read like a legal affidavit of your entire week's schedule.
I have so much going on.
Right. I can't come because I have to take the dog to the vet, and then I have a dentist appointment, my car's making a weird noise, and I have to meal prep for the week.
We have all been on the receiving end of that breathless laundry list of excuses, and as a listener, it is actually exhausting.
It is. But why do we do it? Why do we... just to turn down a cup of coffee.
This brings us to the psychology of guilt. People over-explain because they feel inherently guilty for setting a boundary.
Because society tells us we should always be available.
Exactly. Society often conditions us to believe that we owe everyone our time, unless we have an ironclad, socially acceptable excuse. So, we try to build a fortress of reasons.
A fortress of reasons.
We think that if we provide enough evidence of our busyness, we can prove to the other person that our refusal is justified, and therefore they aren't allowed to be mad at us.
Look at all these chores I have. You have to acquit me of the crime of saying no.
Exactly. You're putting yourself on trial. But socially and psychologically, over-explaining completely backfires. The best advice is to drop the fortress and use a much simpler, cleaner phrase. I'm so sorry, I already have plans.
I already have plans. It's almost mysteriously vague.
And that vagueness is its power. Because when you over-explain, two very negative things happen in the interaction.
What was the first one?
First, it sounds intensely defensive, which immediately makes the interaction feel tense. The other person wonders why you were trying so hard to convince them.
That makes sense.
Second, and more practically, it actually weakens your boundary.
Wait, how does it weaken it?
When you give someone 5 different reasons why you can't do something, you are inadvertently giving them 5 different opportunities to solve your problem.
Oh, wow. You're right. If I say I can't hang out because I have to meal prep and fix my car, a helpful friend might say, oh, I'll come over and help you chop vegetables, and my brother is a mechanic, let me call him.
And now you are completely trapped.
I have weaponized my own excuses against myself.
Exactly. You haven't closed the door, you have opened negotiations.
Wow.
I already have plans is a closed door. Plans could mean a doctor's appointment, or it could mean staring at the ceiling for an hour to recharge your introverted batteries. It is polite, it is definitive, and it does not invite a debate. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for both parties is to be brief.
That is such a huge revelation. But there's a third trap that I think is even more insidious, and it feels like a contradiction based on everything we've talked about so far.
What's that?
The trap of the false yes. Saying yes when you desperately want to say no, purely to avoid conflict.
Ah, the false yes. The ultimate symptom of people-pleasing.
But listen, if we are living in a communication culture that hates a direct no and prioritizes outward harmony and politeness above all else, isn't saying yes to avoid a conflict exactly what the culture is implicitly demanding?
That's a really interesting point.
Aren't you just following the rules of harmony by agreeing, even if you hate it?
That is a brilliant observation, and it highlights exactly why this trap is so incredibly seductive. It feels like you are being the ultimate polite person. You are sacrificing your own comfort for the sake of the social fabric.
Exactly.
But this is where we have to dissect the critical difference between true politeness and pathological people-pleasing.
I am taking notes. What is the fundamental difference?
True politeness, the kind modeled by the 4-step diffusal we discussed, is about maintaining the integrity of the relationship while honoring your own boundaries. It is a dual function.
Okay, dual function. And people-pleasing.
People-pleasing, which results in the false yes, is about avoiding short-term discomfort at the catastrophic cost of long-term trust.
Short-term discomfort for long-term trust. Think about the last time you listening right now said yes to a massive favor that you knew you didn't have the bandwidth for. You thought you were being a great friend.
But think about the physiological reality of that false yes. You agree to help them move on a Saturday. Instantly, your cortisol spikes.
Oh yeah, the dread sets in.
You spend the rest of the week dreading it. You harbor a secret resentment toward the person you're supposed to be helping, even though they have absolutely no idea you didn't want to do it.
They think you're happy to help.
So what happens? You either cancel at the absolute last minute, sending a panic text on Friday night and leaving them completely stranded, or you show up on Saturday exhausted, passive-aggressive, and bitter.
And both of those outcomes do way more damage to the relationship than a polite refusal would have done on Tuesday.
Exactly. Promising something you cannot or will not joyfully deliver is a violation of trust. The goal of the polite refusal, the whole reason we use softeners and apologies and alternative options, is to protect the relationship's integrity.
And a false yes completely destroys that integrity.
It is an act of conversational cowardice, masquerading as politeness. You are lying to protect yourself from the awkwardness of the moment, and you are making it their problem later.
Conversational cowardice, that hits hard. So the ultimate lesson of the traps is, don't be blunt, don't build a fortress of excuses that invites negotiation, and absolutely do not lie just to kick the can of conflict down the road.
That is the tightrope walk. It requires immense emotional maturity.
Which brings us to the next layer of this whole dynamic, because as I dug deeper into the psychology of refusal, there is a point that completely shifts the paradigm again.
Oh, the nonverbals.
Yes. You could be an emotional genius. You could memorize the 4-step framework. You could pick the perfect context-appropriate vocabulary. You could avoid the trap of over-explaining and the false yes. You could have the perfectly constructed, grammatically flawless, polite refusal written out on a piece of paper. And when you deliver it, you could still sound incredibly rude and alienate the person entirely.
Yes. Because human communication is only partially textual. It's not just the words you choose. The physical, auditory, and nonverbal delivery can completely override and alter the meaning of the sentence.
We're talking about the realm of tone, body language, and auditory microsofteners.
Exactly.
Beyond the words, if you look at the physical requirements of a polite refusal, it demands a calm voice, a gentle smile, friendly eye contact, and the total absolute avoidance of impatience.
This goes back to our very first point about effort. If you say the polite words, "I'm so sorry I can't come today," but you say them with a tight jaw, you break eye contact to look at your watch, and you use a clipped, breathless tone.
The words don't matter.
The words themselves become entirely meaningless. The listener's brain will bypass your perfectly constructed vocabulary and instantly process the aggressive, dismissive body language.
It's like you're handing them the beautifully constructed social bomb diffusal, but you're throwing it at their head.
Exactly. The delivery completely invalidates the recipe. The medium is the message.
But beyond the physical delivery, the eye contact, and the smile, there is a whole category of tiny, almost invisible words that act as the ultimate social lubricants. Words like just, a bit, maybe, and perhaps.
These are the micro-adjustments of diplomacy. They're incredibly powerful, yet we barely notice we are using them.
I want to focus on the word just because it is practically magical. Let's look at a side-by-side comparison. Sentence 1, direct. I can't come. Sentence 2, softer. I just can't come today.
The difference is night and day.
It's one tiny 4-letter word, J-U-S-T, but it changes the entire emotional chemistry of the sentence.
It is profound, isn't it? Let's analyze the structural and psychological impact of that tiny word. When you say, "I can't come," it sounds absolute. It sounds like a brick wall.
Yeah.
It is a statement of unyielding fact, driven by your personal agency.
It feels cold, like I have decided not to come.
But when you insert that little word, "I just can't come today," what happens in the listener's brain just acts as a linguistic cushion. It introduces a note of helplessness. It completely externalizes the blame. It implies a whole hidden narrative like, "I have tried to make this work. I have looked at my schedule from every angle. I really wanted to do this, but the universe has conspired against me, and I just cannot make it happen."
Wow. It shifts the blame from your personal choice to external, uncontrollable circumstances, even without explaining what those circumstances are.
Exactly.
It does the job of the fortress of excuses without actually having to list the excuses.
Exactly. It makes the refusal feel less like a rejection of the other person and more like a shared tragedy. We are both victims of my busy schedule. All of that emotional heavy lifting, all that empathy is generated by 4 letters.
The analogy I keep coming back to with these softening words and the gentle tone and the friendly eye contact, it's all wrapping paper.
Wrapping paper. Walk me through that.
Think about it. When you say no to someone, you are essentially handing them a small disappointment. They wanted something from you, your time, your help, your presence, and you are not giving it to them. The refusal itself is a disappointment.
Right.
But the softening words, the smile, the word just, and the word maybe, that is the wrapping paper on the gift box. You are still handing them a disappointment. The contents of the box are still a no.
But the presentation changes everything.
Exactly. The wrapping paper shows that you care deeply about how they receive it. It shows respect for the exchange.
That is a beautiful way to conceptualize it. The contents of the box are fixed, but the care taken in wrapping it preserves their dignity, and it preserves your connection.
But here's the elephant in the room. Understanding all these layers, the four-step diffusal formula, the workplace suit and tie versus social comfortable sweater contexts, the psychological traps of guilt and over-explaining, the wrapping paper of tone and body language is completely overwhelming.
It's a lot to hold in your head.
If you are someone trying to get better at communication or setting boundaries in your own life, how does a person actually internalize all of this? You cannot be in a dynamic, fast-paced conversation and mentally flipping through a 12-point checklist of rules.
You can't. If you are calculating the formula in real time, your cognitive load is just too heavy. The pause before you speak will be too long, your eyes will glaze over, and you will sound intensely unnatural.
Right, you'll sound like a robot.
It has to become reflexive.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the meta layer of our deep dive, the actual methodology of internalizing this kind of complex social choreography.
Because you can't learn this from a textbook. You can read everything we just said on a page, but it won't translate to real life.
Which makes perfect sense when you connect it back to everything we just discussed about tone, delivery, and the micro adjustments of words like just. A textbook is a silent two-dimensional medium.
Yeah.
You simply cannot learn a gentle tone or the specific emotional weight of a pause from a printed page.
A textbook can teach you the lyrics, but it cannot teach you the music.
Exactly. Human communication is a three-dimensional auditory experience. To master it, you need raw, unfiltered auditory data. You need to hear natural speaking speed, the slight hesitations, the sympathetic sighs.
This is why audio learning is so powerful.
This is exactly why auditory immersion is the only way to build the psychological templates required to do this gracefully. You begin to instinctively feel when a sentence sounds too harsh because it literally jars against the auditory rhythm you've built in your brain.
It's about developing muscle memory for your vocal cords and your nervous system. You have to physically practice producing those gentle tones and softening words until they feel as natural as taking a breath.
Absolutely.
So let's put this into action. If a listener, you, listening to this deep dive right now, driving your car or walking the dog, if you want to start practicing this today, what is the very first phrase you should master? Give us the ultimate, most versatile tool to put in our linguistic toolkit.
If you were going to put one phrase in your pocket to start, I would point to what is essentially the ultimate Swiss Army knife of polite refusals. It is incredibly versatile. It works in almost any casual or semi-professional setting.
What is it?
The phrase is, I'd love to, but I can't today.
Let's hear it again with the music.
I'd love to, but I can't today.
It is a masterpiece of efficiency. Let's break it down based on everything we've unpacked today. I'd love to. There is your phase one, your appreciation, your validation, and your warmth.
It signals immense enthusiasm for the connection, stroking the ego of the person asking.
But I can't. There is phase three, the clear, unambiguous boundary. You are cutting the wire.
And then the end.
And today, that is the subtle softener, the phase four alternative. That implies this is a temporary logistical issue, not a permanent rejection of the person.
It perfectly encapsulates the dual requirement of a complex refusal, showing enthusiasm for the relationship while firmly, safely holding the boundary. It is the perfect linguistic diffusal, wrapped in beautiful paper.
And if you practice saying it with a warm tone, making eye contact, and offering a genuine smile, you can use it to gracefully decline an offer without causing a single ripple of offense.
It is a highly protective phrase. It protects them from rejection, and it protects you from overcommitment.
Incredible. Well, let's take a breath and briefly recap the massive psychological journey we've been on in this deep dive. We started by looking at how a direct, blunt no can cause literal social whiplash, because in certain communicative cultures, the effort you put into softening a blow is the direct metric of your respect for the other person.
We examined the underlying architecture of diffusing the social bomb, acknowledging the wire with gratitude, cooling the system with an apology, clearly cutting the wire with a refusal, and stabilizing the aftermath with an alternative.
We looked at how to tailor your linguistic wardrobe to fit the occasion, using I wish I could for friends to share emotional desire and, unfortunately, my bandwidth is full, to maintain professional, sterile boundaries in the workplace.
We navigated the dangerous psychological traps of over-explaining out of guilt, which only invites unwanted negotiation. And we dissected the destructive nature of the people-pleasing false yes, which trades short-term comfort for long-term relational damage.
We uncovered the massive power of delivery, tone, and tiny softening words like just to externalize blame and reduce defensiveness. And finally, we looked at how immersing yourself in the music of language is the only way to build the muscle memory required to pull this off under pressure.
It is a delicate, intricate balance, but it is a completely masterable skill.
It really is. And I'd like to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that scales beyond just the mechanics of learning vocabulary. We've spent this entire time looking at how to navigate cultural norms to avoid sounding rude or abrupt to others.
But consider the internal shift this creates.
Exactly. Could learning to systematize how you say no, treating it as a mechanical four-step process, actually make you better at setting healthy, guilt-free boundaries in your own life?
That is a fascinating angle, because it removes the emotion.
Think about it. So many of us struggle to say no because the word feels emotionally loaded. We associate it with conflict, with letting people down, with being a bad friend or a bad employee. It spikes our anxiety.
It really does.
But perhaps by learning the mechanical, structural rules of a polite refusal, by treating it like a script you just have to execute beautifully, it gives us a necessary emotional distance.
I see what you mean.
It helps us